Ladies and sluts. That's right. Ladies are ladies, sluts are dudes. Just in case there was any confusion there. Ladies and sluts. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by, you guessed it, Shooter Lube. America's best two-stage cleaning and oil system on the market. Military-grade cleaning solvent. New technology has you cleaning your weapon better than ever. The solvent is designed to penetrate deep into the metal, cleaning carbon built up. Oh my God, I can't even fucking read today. Cleaning carbon built up in much less... Cleaning carbon that's built up in much less time than other leading solvents. Feel good knowing that you're cleaning your firearms with a product that passed military testing. We set new standards. Your firearm maintenance should not be banished to the garage. Now, here's the thing. If you're being banished to the garage to clean your firearms, you might also need a new wife. Not only do you need some new cleaner, but you might need to consider a new wife. Whether that's because of the harsh chemicals or smells that other solvents use, or because of your fucking wife, who knows? But Shooter Lube military grades weapon cleaning solvent is simply the best. Odorless, no water, fully evaporates, leaves no residue, no hazardous ingredients per the EPA. High flash point, non-corrosive, does not freeze, non-flammable. Standard gun lubricants and CLPs are outdated, and they are a thing of the past. Shooter Lube's extreme weapons oil is different, you guys. With the new cutting-edge technology, with a new cutting-edge lubricant, they're creating a new level of gun lubricant and protection. Unlike many gun oils out there that just sit on the surface, the extreme weapons oil penetrates deep into the pores of the metal. It forms a bond on and in the metal that does not wipe off, wear off, melt, evaporate with heavy use. None of that shit. Feel confident using your weapon to its fullest potential, knowing that it is fully protected from wear and corrosion. It's biodegradable, non-flammable, non-toxic, 100% synthetic. I'm Mike Tyson. Low odor, non-staining, rust and corrosion protection, reduces wear and friction. Shop now. Go to Join the Revolution. That's what I'm supposed to say. Join the Revolution by going to shooterlube.com and using Singer at checkout. Now, it was supposed to be back to 10%, but I think they extended the 15%. So there's a thing on their website that says holiday discount 15% off. If you use code Santa, you'll get whatever promo they have going on. Singer is going to be the same discount. So put in Singer. If you get 10% off, you get 10. If you get 15, you get 15. Santa's not going to get you 15 if Singer's not going to get you 15, but I don't think they updated their website. They were supposed to end that on the 19th, but it's neither here nor there. Today's episode of the podcast is also sponsored by my Patreon. We got a special going on. If you join right now for that middle bracket, it's $4.20. And then the top bracket, instead of being $10, it's $6.90. $4.20.69. You can see how mature I am. Yeah, so go to Jared Singer, go to patreon.com/Jared Singer live and join the Patreon today. There is bonus content on there and shit. Today's guest on the podcast is Sam Cooke. He's my uncle. He's an entrepreneur. He's led a fascinating life, worked with some amazing people. Just a sweet dude, a cool dude, just some amazing stories. Please welcome to the podcast my uncle, Sam Cooke. But yeah, and then have the VR headset like even cover my nose a little bit, and they got to get smell-o-vision worked out. Oh
yeah, little smell sense.
Yeah, so when you're here, get that a little closer to you.
Yeah,
and you can move that back to you. You stay comfortable and move the mic to you.
Right
that
on.
Thing's fully movable.
Right on.
If it's a little loose, I'll tighten it up for you. But yeah, smell-o-vision, VR, AR, the whole 9 yards. So I can sit there in my basement or in my fucking living room. Doesn't matter where now.
And it brings you anywhere.
And then I can sit there and fish. Just hear the crickets chirping.
In the back. Yeah,
yep.
In the background.
Yep. You smell that faint hint of moose shit in the air.
That's the scent aspect.
Nothing like it.
Yeah, no. Modern technologies bring us into many, many cool areas.
Fuck yeah. I'm very excited for the future of technology until it becomes mandatory that we start putting things in our heads to link us with computers.
Kind of like when you're doing the blood thing, they put a little portal in your chest so you can just click on to you.
Yeah. And I'm not even talking about like government mandated. I'm just talking about like socially the like you can, if you don't hook up to a computer and download entire encyclopedias of information, you just can't survive in that world anymore. So you see what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
you just end up having to do it. Not like the government's coming down to be like, you have to.
It's
Yeah,
personal choice.
right. But it's like having the internet now. Like, you could live without the internet, but you're going to live a very weird life because you're not going to have any idea what's going on.
Access information.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, it's like, living a life without a library almost, you know?
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, dude, thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
It took a while.
It took a lot. What was it? Episode 22?
22 is what we were going to shoot for.
So let's start there. Explain what's your obsession with the number 22 or 2?
You know, Paul Krause, Hall of Famer. Paul Krause was one of my favorite football players growing up as a kid, and I ultimately wore 22 on my football jersey at Tartan High School, Oakdale, Minnesota, back in the early 80s. And so 22 has just always been my number. Just always been my number.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
So that's why.
I was hoping it wasn't something weird like some Emmitt Smith shit, you know?
No. Met him.
Seems
That's
like a
about
cool
it.
guy, though.
Yeah. Shorter than you'd think.
Did you hear the story? Ashton Kutcher and some other dude were arguing about who's the greatest running back of all time, Walter Payton or Emmitt Smith. And, of course, Ashton Kutcher's already rich and famous at this point, and they're at a game, and suddenly they see Emmitt Smith. So Ashton, being the fucking goofball that he is, something that I would do, I'd walk up and I'd be like, dude, okay, here's the deal. We're having a debate, and we need you to settle this. Who's a better running back, you or Walter Payton? And fucking without hesitation, Emmitt Smith's like, Payton all day.
Yeah.
Sweetness.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not even close.
He didn't have the blocking that Emmett had throughout his career.
And that's no slight on Emmett, because Emmett was a beast.
Emmett ran through a lot of holes. Walter didn't have many holes to run through, but he had to make do.
Yep.
And made do.
Yep, like a Gale Sayers, like an Eric Dickerson.
Stronger, tougher defenses in the NFC division as well at that time. He had to play against twice a season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We were supposed to do episode 22. You were supposed to be on back then. It didn't work out. It doesn't work out all the time.
Nope.
That's the hardest part about doing this podcast.
Right.
You know, people ask me, especially people that are doing similar stuff, they'll come on and be like, so like, do you edit? And I'm like, no. Nope. In fact, now I got this bitch completely automated. I press one button when I want to do this thing.
Yeah.
And then we can switch cameras, and I don't even have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then I press one more button when I want to go back to the main camera.
No control.
And then I press one button when we're done to hit the outro, and then I hit one more button to actually physically stop the streaming. Other than that, it's automated.
I tell you, you've
now.
come a long way in 47 shows. You've come a long ways in 47
I appreciate that.
I remember your first ones. Yeah,
I watched them. They were fun.
Kept an eye on them.
They were great.
Yeah.
They weren't great, but they were great to do.
Oh yeah.
They were fun.
Well,
I've learned a lot.
Like when what's his face left the Daily Show, and when Jon Stewart left the Daily Show, and the guy who's there today has to come in and do it. It took him a few shows to get it down, but once you do a few, they just fall right in place.
Yeah, there is a lot to learn, and I still don't know what I'm doing. Like, I still have no idea what I'm doing. I really don't. And this is not me. All of this stuff that I've done here is not because I'm like awesome or innovative. It's because I'm fucking lazy. It's because editing takes a lot of time and work. All the other shit takes a lot of time and work. And basically, when you're doing a 3 to 4 hour long or 2 to 4 hour long form podcast, I think the shortest one I've ever done is an hour and a half. Between doing the podcast and scheduling the podcast, the last thing I can add to that plate is fucking like editing and more producing during the podcast. I have a hard enough paying attention and having a good conversation as it is. When I have to worry about where the camera is and do this shit, I'm all over the place. And I'm still all over the place.
It's a lot of footage to go through as well. I mean, your shows aren't, 30-minute shows. They're long shows. So if one was going to do any editing or slice or dicing, it would be quite a lot.
Yeah.
So this is just push, go, and go.
Yep. And plus, that's the beauty of a podcast
Yes.
is it's not a TV show. It's not a radio show. There's not commercial breaks. It's not produced or edited. It's just
It is what it
whoever.
is.
It's just whoever I want to talk to, whoever I think is cool or interesting or is doing something cool. It's just us having a conversation. And people dig it, man. People really dig the informality of it. You leave the fuck ups in. You leave the errors in.
Right.
You know,
Right.
kind of cool.
Very cool.
I'm glad you finally made it, dude.
No,
I've been looking forward
happy
to this
be
for a
here.
long time. So let's explain to people who don't know who you are. Give them your backstory, where you come from, all that kind of shit. Because you got a long, complicated history.
It is kind of different. Yeah, so sit back, relax. No. Actually, I was born Thomas Dean Pataki, Pataky.
Yeah.
Part of your family.
People don't know this, but we are blood relatives.
actually are.
Your mother is my grandmother's sister.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. And but I was cross-culturally adopted in 1964 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when it was illegal to do so. There was actually a bill on the books called the Minnesota African American Heritage Act that required African American kids to go into African American families, and it was state law. A lot of the majority people in Minnesota didn't particularly care for that, so they kind of did it anyways, and they started out in Lake Elmo where I grew up. So
Holy shit.
I was one of the very first ones in 1964 to be cross-culturally adopted out to the Rosses. So
in case anybody doesn't really know, because there are a lot of younger people that watch this, but most people are my age. But even my age has a hard time because this is 20 years before that. 64 is literally the height of the civil rights movement when those bills are actually being passed.
1968 was the Olympics,
Yep.
And a lot of cultural unstrife, kind of like the unrest we are living through here in 2019.
Yeah, and a lot of people my age will say, like, well, we never had, fucking slavery here. True. We never had segregation here. True. But apparently we did have this bill, which meant white people couldn't adopt black kids. Is that?
It was.
That's what you're saying?
Randy Stanton was the legislator from North Minneapolis, recently passed away, but he was the state rep and one of my mentors growing up, who authored that bill. And it ultimately, in the 90s, the Minnesota political collective went to the federal government to supersede the bill. So that's how they ultimately beat it. And now it happens quite often. And, it's a good thing because all kids needs home.
Right.
If there's a
Absolutely,
home and there's a
100%.
kid, and they can be put together for some stability, then that ought to happen.
So you got adopted by a family called the Rosses.
It was the Rosses, Robert and Janet Ross of Lake Elmo, Minnesota. Yep. I had 3 older brothers.
How old were you when you were adopted?
6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So you don't remember
6
anything
months.
other than that. That is your family,
Right,
as
right.
far as you're concerned.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And are you the only adopted kid?
Actually, no. My sister was adopted at 5 years old from Korea, from South
Holy
Korea.
shit. Okay.
Yep.
So this is an extremely
I-
progressive family back then. For
Back then.
1964,
Yeah,
this is
early
this
70s.
is top woke.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah. Oh,
which
no.
our family's kind of notorious for. Our family is weird. Like, we're a very cross-racial family. Most people don't know that or believe that, but
Yep.
there's other people in our family that have adopted.
Right.
The whitest couple I know and have ever seen in my life. I can't recall their names. They're on the distant side of the family, but they've adopted several kids from other countries.
Yep. So we were a small UN out there in Lake Elmo.
That's cool.
And had a lot of positive aspects to it, and some negative, but nothing that we never worked through. So it's good. Overall, it's a good experience.
So how long did you grow up in Lake Elmo? Did you guys move before?
I was there through high school. Then went to college up at St. Cloud State University.
Okay.
Which was another experience in itself. That was back when St. Cloud was quite the notorious party school, and I can say we brought a lot to that when we
Still
got
is.
there. Yeah.
Still is.
Well, nothing like it used to be.
Well,
Yeah,
nothing's like it used to be.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But then I went up to St. Cloud, so I up till 18. So growing up out in the suburbs, the mindset was I was a white suburban kid, until I really left St. Cloud after a couple years and went down to Texas. And that's when I really started learning more about the African American culture, the African American experience, and my Black history, because you don't learn much in high school. They don't teach a whole lot
in white suburban Minnesota.
Correct.
I mean, it's always kind of been, side note, little disingenuous, something that most of us have noticed, and something I've heard a lot of people say, and I can't recall if you're on it, but I've heard people like Morgan Freeman and other major speakers of the Black community say, like, they don't want Black History Month because it's relegated to 1 month.
Right.
And especially in white,
round.
and especially because in white cultures and suburban white cultures, like, it's
round.
like, okay, it's Black History Month, like, okay, and then every year they learn about the same 12 Black dudes,
right.
and it's like, this is so stupid. We should just be teaching American history because Black people are part of that. Do you subscribe to that way of thinking?
Of course. Oh yeah.
Especially growing up in a white suburban community, you can see, like,
your history gives you,
because you are Black and still didn't take anything from that. That's what I just heard you say, is that growing up in white, because we had Black History Month back then. We've had History Month for a long time.
Yep.
And whatever limited history you can get, it's just, even if you are Black, you're not taking it. You had to go to another state halfway across the country. Yep. And what many people would say is another country. Right. I mean, Texas is kind of its own.
Hey, if they could, they would. They talk about secession today. Texas has been working on secession for generations.
And maybe they should.
Yeah, they have. No, it's different down there.
Kate and I might be moving down there.
I spent some time. I was blessed, because after I left Minnesota, I had the best job with some friends of mine, and we hit almost every major city in Texas. We traveled all across the country. We stayed in hotels and drove rental cars and did some brake changeovers at auto parts stores where we were down there. So we had a great opportunity to get to Corpus Christi, San Antonio, based in Houston, was in Waco, flew into Waco. So Texas is a interesting place. It's a little slower than Minnesota. You got to drink soda down there. You can't drink pop.
Until you get to Dallas, I heard. Once you get into Dallas, like the city of Dallas, it's just like any other big city. I heard there's no accents. I've never been to Dallas. So
just a little slower. Everything's just a little slower.
Even in Dallas, huh?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: so you're you're this young Black kid coming out of a completely white community. I mean, even going to St. Cloud. Right. I mean, that's still fucking.
It's whiter than St. Cloud,
and it's St. Elmo to St. Cloud. Those neither. I mean, you said suburbs, like that. To me, that's. I grew up in the suburbs. Like, that to me is like, even St. Cloud is still kind of like Hickville. Like, you're still way out there. You're not really even in Minneapolis. So did you, when you were that kid growing up then, did you have a dream? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up type scenario? Like, were you going to try to be a ball player, hockey guy?
Law enforcement.
You wanted to be a cop?
Truth be told, that's, law enforcement. So I did take some law enforcement classes up there in St. Cloud.
Okay.
But generally focused on my general studies. But once again, my entertainment and my entrepreneurism came out, and we ended up throwing parties.
And that happened in college.
Every Thursday night. Oh yeah, marketing. We were advertising in the women's bathrooms, inside the stalls, because wherever the women went, the men went. So we hosted and threw parties and made money every Thursday night up in St. Cloud, and that's pretty much what I ultimately ended up doing.
So by this time, it's got to be the mid 80s then.
1984,
yeah.
1983, yep.
So it's a completely different world from when you were born. Civil rights is a completely different thing, but we still don't really have, because I'm intrigued by this idea of, there's something that I don't think a lot of people understand. And in American culture, we don't really listen to our elders very much anymore, and we definitely don't value wisdom as a culture anymore.
Shamefully so.
And the reason I say this is because our perception, a young white kid pretty much thinks one of two ways nowadays. And who knows? Most Black kids could probably think this way too. I don't know. I really don't know. But they either think there's no racism, right? Other than the extreme shit and obvious shit, right? Yeah. And they're like, dude, fucking no one cares anymore. Or everything's fucking racist, right?
Right.
And the kid on the one side who goes, that's not fucking racist, that's not racist, blah, 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 blah. It's because they watch Black movies, they listen to Black music, they know Black people, there's Black kids at their school. Like, they don't see it as two different things, Right.
Right.
And then there's the other people on the other side, which I don't know why they think every single fucking thing is racist. I don't even want to get into that shit. My point is coming up in the mid 80s, being a young man, 18 to 24 years old, it is a completely different story. So you don't have as much overt racism as you did over the last 10 to 20 years, but you got one famous black guy in each industry, right? Am I correct?
Back then,
you got one black
job,
comedian
and at every company. There's always that one guy at work. Everybody's, Johnny.
And I'm not trying to paint some picture like we were still secretly racist. I'm saying granted, yes, there was a lot.
Recognize it?
There was a lot, but there's also a lot less people. Like, just bottom line. I mean, back in the 80s, there wasn't 330 million people on the planet. I think there was 174. So you do the math, there's less of everyone.
Right.
Black people still to this day make 13%. So 13% of 330 million equals a lot more black people than there were in 84.
Right.
When there was 174 million or whatever. So where I'm going with this is perception. Right. The perception of how things are versus how things were. Because I have this conversation with a ton of people and they're like, that's not fucking true. When I grew up, I was told da da da. And I'm like, dude, that was 30 years ago. We were told that, dude.
Right.
Like, that's not reality anymore. I mean, we didn't know shit 30 years ago. So I'm interested to hear about this more in depth, about how and why you ended up going to Texas, and that's where you ended up learning more about your black culture,
because there really wasn't
the history.
much up in St. Cloud, as you said, and for me, there wasn't, when things happened to me, I knew that they were wrong and I knew that they were different, but they were never to the point where they threw me off my stride, because I was a pretty headstrong kid, pretty intelligent kid, and I was a very popular kid, and I had a lot of cats that rolled with me. So, there weren't, in high school, whenever it would come up, before I'd even know it was happening, one of my buddies was already beating the shit out of somebody. So, and this would happen all the time. So I didn't see a lot of it. I just, ultimately, it came our way, and we just dealt with it but I never really had to bounce it off of anything. I just knew it was different. I just knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what it was.
It's almost like you didn't even know, you didn't have words to describe it. Like, you didn't even know what actual racism was.
Right. But I knew whatever happened when it happened was wrong. But then I had a pretty fast tongue too, so I probably was quick to cuss a motherfucker out or beat a motherfucker up pretty quick. I was a wrestler too. So.
Right. I was just gonna say.
I grew up with 14 guys that all lived within 3 years apart.
And you grew up in the sticks. You grew up in the sticks, which is farm country.
Grew up in the sticks, so yeah.
I know what that's like, because people don't understand. Country strong is a real thing.
Right.
And it's like, these guys may not be jacked and look like fucking wrestlers, but at the end of the day, is what is going on is these dudes have like endurance for days. They have old man strength at 29. We
were a full service. We had 3 or 4 guys were mechanics,
right?
So when we'd go up to a group of guys and start fighting, these mechanics would run right through them, go right to their cars, and just start taking the cars off. As they were getting their ass kicked. They'd go back to their car. Oh, we were full service back then.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're down in Texas. So you say, for the most part, you just weren't exposed, and you didn't really know.
My first black girl.
So you
first black church.
So were things happening to you in Texas, and then they were explained to you, like, or were they happening to other people around you, and you were like, oh shit, I used to go through that?
It really,
like, how did you discover there was an issue?
For me, it was a personal education mission that I was kind of on. Is that I'd spent 18, 19 years in the white community. I wanted to learn more about black people and black life. So it was a personal thing for me to go out of my way to begin to.
And it was deliberate. It wasn't accidental.
Clearly it was deliberate. And so, that's why I dated my first African American, went to the first church, but it was in Indianapolis, because I moved 2 years out of Houston. I moved to Indianapolis. And then I ended up.
So you were a bit of a gypsy. You moved around a lot.
Well, yeah. Yep. But in Indianapolis, I worked at a black cultural center, the Madam Walker Urban Life Center. She was the first millionairist African-American woman. She manufactured the hair comb and hair gel and created entrepreneur hairdressers throughout the country.
Sure.
So back during segregated times in Indianapolis, this building that I worked at was the one and all building for black people. It had a theater in it. It had a ballroom in it for weddings. It had some business floor space in it. And it has the museum on the top floor. So there was a lot of black culture, black meetings, black entertainers coming through. That's where I met I met Chuck D from Chuck D there. Trying to think of the funniest comedian I met there. I've drawn a blank on his name, but he was Sweet Dick Willie in one of the movies. But they all came through the Walker Building, and so I was able to really get a crash course history lesson. I used to sit at catered meetings, food catered meetings, where the leadership would be in having meetings. So gained a lot of information and knowledge in Indianapolis.
And you're 20-ish.
I'm 26. Yep.
Okay, so
26,
this is your experience through your 20s.
Yeah.
So your world's being rocked.
Out.
And in case anybody can't understand what this is like, if you're a musician or a weirdo or a nerd or an outcast in any way, and I gotta say this, if you're an outcast as a white person, I'm not saying like you were an outcast being black, but like weird, awkward musicians felt this way until we met other musicians.
Right.
And then suddenly it was like, oh fuck, there's like other people that think like me and feel like me, and like, oh shit, there's guys that are better than me and have it better than me. There's guys that aren't as good as me and don't have it as good as me. You can take that and understand what that's like. You don't have to be somebody who's been deprived of their culture, like, in order to understand that. Maybe to that degree, obviously,
right.
But like that makes a ton of sense. So when did things shift for you from, was there an aha moment where you go, okay, I don't want to just be a cop. I think I know what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And you said, okay, I want to start focusing on actual politics.
Well, we gotta go back in time for the aha moment, because that's a great question. Where, why am I here where I'm at today? And what motivated me to go the path I went. And that was when I was in 6th grade. I was probably 10, 11, or 12, somewhere around there. I had hip surgery, and there was a black doctor who did my hip surgery, Dr. Dan Gauthier, I think his name was. And but he picked me up and put me on a table and told me I was going to go back and help the black community one day. And this is, back when I didn't know what he was saying, didn't understand what he was saying, but I always remembered what he said. So that was the big aha piece that really kind of focused things and got more honed in Indianapolis. I think is where I got my biggest black education, until the Million Man March course back here in Minneapolis, when me and the brothers went to Washington, D.C. for the Million Man March, and consequently created the Men of March group afterwards, and they're still meeting today.
So obviously,
years later.
Obviously, it wasn't the original Million Man March, because that happened back in.
It was 95.
Well, the original one was way back.
No, that was 64. That was the original one.
That's what I'm saying.
That was
okay.
when Martin Luther King spoke. So yeah.
But there was a second one
in 95.
And wasn't there just one again recently?
There was. I think it was a family march, the Million Family March.
Is that what it was? I thought it was a Million Man March again, and it was during the Trump administration, either in 2020 or 2019.
No, I know they did a women's march up there, but no, I don't think there's been a Million Man March since the one. But there might be one coming up soon. But yeah, that there was they working with the elders in the community and taking that bus trip. I think we had 4 buses with a couple motorhomes and a bunch of cars that all pulled out of Minnesota, and that was quite an experience. Okay,
so basically, if I'm understanding it right, is you're really young, you get injured, black doctor says something, black community something.
Go fix it.
And in your mind, you're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about?
Right.
But the seed's been planted. So now, for the next several years, you start thinking about the black community. When you have your chance, you start traveling the country. It seems very organic from you getting involved with the community organizing stuff to where you eventually ended up in politics. But again, that's why I asked if there was like an aha moment. So was it kind of the galvanization in 95 where you're like, it was at that Million Man March
That's where you're
Well,
kind of like,
I
this
think-
is what I'm doing now.
I think
I'm
it's
getting involved with
I think
politics
it
and
was
shit.
when and how I got hired in Indianapolis. I mean, I went to the Madam Walker Urban Life building for an event.
You said you were 26 when I asked you. How old were you when you got to Indianapolis?
Probably 22. I was there for 4 years.
Okay.
So I had gone to the Walker building for a fashion show, some type of show, and I don't remember who or why I was there, but I was waiting for it to start, and it just didn't start. I'm like, why isn't this starting? And it didn't start because there was no leadership. So I literally got up, figured out what was going on, and literally got that show up and running at the Walker building.
Wow.
And that's where I got hired by the caterer who was doing the catering at the time.
Oh, wow.
So my abilities to create and produce events, in that manner, and ultimately other manners as well, was a big aha moment as well as I put the entertainment and the producing together, and then ultimately producing around benefits, creating benefits events for Sabathani and community organizations as well.
Because you've had kind of a twofold. Because you're mentioning the production and the entertainment side of things, but you've also gotten involved with politics.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I want to finish up before we get into the entertainment stuff, because I understand that you do both things, and at some point in time you were doing both things, but it seemed, because you worked with Jesse Ventura, correct?
I did.
Okay. So you, at some point in time, you decided to kick it up a notch and get serious. What I mean by that is kind of just, maybe this is a really shitty way of saying it, but I don't know. It's the words I have, is like, I feel like when you're doing things on a community level, that might be where you can actually do the most good and have the most impact, but it's still kind of like the minor leagues. Whereas when you jump up to the state or federal level and you start working on shit at that's the major leagues. Now you're playing pro ball.
That's a great question, because that was, so when I got back to Minneapolis, I served as a board member on the Miss Black Minnesota pageant. So I was ended up producing one of 3 years of the Miss Black Minnesota pageant, and that was a good pageant because it was an educational forum. Miss Julene Jackson and the woman before her, they had workshops and seminars of educational opportunities, and then for the last 3 weeks put together the pageant. But after I left the pageant, I worked for the Minneapolis Urban League, and I call them tours. I had 3 tours at the Minneapolis Urban League. So I was.
What is the Minneapolis Urban League for people that don't understand?
Minneapolis Urban League is a nonprofit organization that it has a 100-year history. That has majority, for the most part, majority board members, but they work in the interests of Black Minnesotans and Black people across the country. And there was a St. Paul Urban League and a Minneapolis Urban League, but I did public policy for the Minneapolis Urban League, and that was this probably year 2, 3, and 4. I was here back home in Minnesota, but that's where. I co-founded Al McFarland's. He does a show called Insight, his podcast shows now. But we created what was called the Insight KMOJ Insight Public Policy Forum at Lucille's, and at the chicken joint across the street from the Urban League. And that all got started with me producing a series of political debates with senators, congressmen, governors. Jesse was one of them.
Gotcha.
I was one of the moderator for those political debates, and with Jesse, because I liked wrestling and I liked him as a wrestler, I gave him some extra consulting leading up to his debates. But as you all saw back then, he was a hell of a debater. He out-debated Humphrey and Coleman at every debate. But
dude, I went back and read a bunch of his policies and statements. There's a website, I can't remember the name of it, I'm sorry for the listeners, but there's a website you can go to where you can find any issue. Just type in the issue, right? Or scroll down a list, click the issue, and then find out what any politician has ever said on record about that issue, and you can do it in reverse. You can go find any politician and see where they stood on any issue. And that dude was elected in 96, 98, something like that. And he was making statements in 99, 2000, and 2001 that were borderline prophecy. Like, he was so smart and so wise. And like, when I mean wise, I'm talking like he understood shit beyond the year. He was a man amongst boys, like how they talk about Lawrence Taylor on the football field.
Right.
As a rookie, this 22-year-old kid shows up and he's a man amongst boys from day one. That's what Jesse was like intellectually back then. Yeah. And dude, someday I'd love to have him on the podcast, but he's hard to listen to and talk to now, man. Like, he doesn't have it all there anymore.
Yeah, well, he probably landed on his head a few times in the ring.
Right.
And
hard life. He was a Marine.
Right. But his news conferences were great because he would sit and engage these media folk when they would ask him questions. And, they were outstanding. They were just fun to watch.
That's fucking cool. So basically is what I'm understanding is you didn't drive yourself into politics. You had already been involved and had a little bit of credibility on the political side. You were a good speaker, and then you ran these entertainment events and production events, and that just opened a door for you, and you kind of sidestepped your way into politics almost.
That public policy forum, as I look back at that, and when I took my sabbatical post B96, the only reason I was able to just leave for as long as I left was the fact that KMOJ Inside Public Policy was really happening every week, every Tuesday. And what's really cool is because we would go for an hour, not live on the air, but then we'd redo that same show on the air. And every time we'd do a show in that hour, someone would say something culturally ignorant, would be chastised, and would educate themselves around it. And then they would be done perfectly on the radio show.
Oh, I say culturally ignorant shit all the time on this podcast, dude.
It did, yeah, but
I'm hilarious,
and it's your show, and it's just you and your guests. But when you're in a diner and there's 3 microphones there, and you got people waiting to speak, and you got audience members out there. I mean, this public policy, and it changed. Al, once we got done with our last political debate, Al just made it a health topic, and he's been rolling ever since. But just the ability to discuss those issues and have legislators, state reps, federal reps, governors come into your place and discuss these issues, it was really good for democracy, and I was very proud of it and could stand on that.
So explain to people a little bit in detail what was going on there, because that's a perfect segue into where I wanted to go next. So you were working with, you had already had rapport with Jesse, you had been involved with a couple smaller things. Explain the KMOJ deal.
The KTTB B96 deal.
Well, that's what led into that. But you had gotten your foothold first with KMOJ, doing the. So explain to people first, what was KMOJ?
KMOJ is the Institute for Community Development, and it is an educational. It was created to help African Americans get into the business of radio, and there was a melting pot. Many have come through it and taken off, and are doing their jobs all around the country. You really are a politician. It's a fucking local hip hop station. That's what it is. But no, people think it is.
That's what it is.
But it is. But deep down, but that's what's significant about Minnesota. Is
I feel you. I feel you. I understand.
It's an educational breeding ground for that, for people to come and go.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it is hip hop music, and it was a 1,000 watt giant.
It's what people don't understand is on the outside.
And it was the only radio station programming to African Americans
for local hip hop, correct?
For local hip hop, except for KDWB, but they would do the crossover stuff.
They started doing that after KMOJ. Right. They started doing that kind of shit after B96. Like KDWB is a Disney owned and run organization, or at least they used to be. I think now they're I think they're actually under the
Clear Channel.
Oh wait, no, because they are with KQ, and KQ Clear is still. No, it's still Disney. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're Disney or Clear Channel.
Giants, yeah.
But they don't care two fucking shits about the local community. The only reason 93X ever had a loud and local thing for local metal is because of Patrick. That's the only reason, is because of Patrick Olson.
Player
B96, however, from the outside, people thought, oh, this is just a really cool radio station where I can hear local hip-hop, underground hip-hop, old school hip-hop, like all the shit that's not quote-unquote good enough to make it on KDWB. However, is what people don't know is what you just explained. It was an actual engine to help people from the black community actually make it from wherever they are and whatever they want to do, right, and get into the entertainment business on the radio side, correct, which is pretty fucking cool. So then that led you, and that ended up being wildly successful. And I knew about KMOJ. I had listened to KMOJ, but this is before we met. Yep. This is before you came back into my life or our lives, right, whatever.
Right.
And we don't have to touch on that too deeply, but it led
that was
into
1999 that happened.
Yep.
All that happened.
And that led into you being part of the group that started B96, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
that's where shit really gets interesting.
The fact of the matter is, Vusi Zulu would tell you they were all never really too happy with me and my radio push, because my radio push took 10 years to build KTTB 96, to get the political support, to get the powers that be, the owners of the station to sell to us, because that was a problem. Part of our oppression on that front of communication was if no one's going to sell you a property, you're not going to get a property. So we knew which properties were distressed. We knew which properties were the worst on the Arbitron ratings, and we knew that they were ultimately going to sell. And they would tell us, "No, we're not selling. No,
so
we're
not selling.
So you're
literally talking about physically getting a space.
So, yeah, to get that 100,000 watt slot on the dial. Because remember, KMOJ's a 1,000 watt nonprofit radio station,
mm-hmm,
and they did get a bigger signal, but that was because we were in cahoots with the whole B96 thing really took a shit on me anyways. We'll get into that later. But yeah, so that KMOJ and the people there were never really happy when I brought it up and continued to bring it up. But I felt that this community could serve, 2 radio stations could serve our community. One could program old, one could program young, one could do more news and information, one could do the music, and you just touch more people, especially when 40% of African Americans live in the suburbs. So that's why I was steadfast, and we finally pulled that off in 1999 when we bought that piece of shit tower out in Cumberland
I remember
County
when I first met you,
that never should have been built.
This was one of the few mistakes I ever made in judgment on picking a winner. Like, I'm so fucking good at like hearing an idea and be like, that's a great idea. That's a terrible idea. And this is one of the only times I actually remember being fucking dead wrong. You told me about this idea and I laughed at you. I said, you actually think you're going to be able to compete with Disney. Like, okay, so you're going to go up against KD, because that's what you said. You said we're going up against KDWB. Our job, if we do our jobs right, KDWB is no longer going to be the best radio station for that music in Minneapolis. Whereas KMOJ never really had the ability to make that push. And I laughed at you. I remember this. And like 5-10 years later, you fucking pulled it off. Like, it finally happened. It literally happened. You guys beat KDWB in the ratings. You stole what's his fuck who had been there.
Tony Fly.
Yep, who had been there. Yep. He was KDWB at that point. Like, and you completely forced them to change their format, which they had never done. Like, I just remember.
Check and balance is a beautiful thing.
I just remember that was, for me, it was 2 things. It was a moment of humility, and it was very humbling for me to be that fucking wrong about your idea, but it was also incredibly inspiring because it was like, oh, you can take on the monster. Yeah. You can beat the monolith. It takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes usually some sort of coalition.
Yeah. Well, you know where that came from? Indianapolis.
No shit.
One of those guys that was in those meetings at that building, and his name was Bill Mays from Mays Chemical. I called Bill Mays.
No shit.
And Bill Mays says, call Ross Love out in Cincinnati. Called Ross Love. Bill Mays said, call you. Next thing you know, that was 2 years before we launched, and we were all financed up and ready to go.
No shit.
It was just getting a property to sell to us, and that's when, Jim Wycor, Steve Woodbury, and John Linder sold us that piece of crap tower, and took us.
I need a button
up the river.
I don't want to cut you off, but I need a button to hit so I can go doot doot doot. Breaking news: Tim Walz is about to start a press conference. So the entire state of Minnesota is about to be on the internet. So our stream may start getting affected over the next hour. So I just want to give you guys a heads up right now. I've been monitoring it the whole time. Everything's been going fantastic. So if we start experiencing issues, I'm not stopping or taking it down. You're just gonna have to deal with the glitchy video. The audio will be fine. So the listeners won't notice a difference, but you guys are just gonna have to bear through it. I'm not postponing these damn things because Tim Walz. I'm just not doing
2
it.
o'clock news conference on COVID.
Yep.
Yeah.
Specifically on Tuesdays is the big one.
Oh,
it's the Tuesday to it's Dominated Tuesdays.
And there's a new strain coming from the UK.
This shit is terrifying, man.
Yes,
at least we got some more money coming back. And I you know what? I feel for you if you're not on any real unemployment,
right,
and you're actually looking at just this $600. That's fucked. That's so fucked. I'm looking at the extra $300 a week and going, okay, I can breathe for a couple weeks. Like, what is it, 11 weeks? I'm like, okay, I'm still not making as much money as I was. I'm still making way less. Yeah. But it's like, okay, I can breathe. A lot of people, $300 a week is going to help a lot because it's per person. So Kate's getting 300 as well. Because we've been looking for work, and based on what I'm available and able to do or willing to do, really, I'm in a pretty fortunate situation. I can kind of pick and choose my spots.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of hard work too. I didn't fall into that. I strategically placed myself in a position to be in 100% control. Also something I kind of took from you a while back. We'll get back to that. But Kate's got this glorious resume, and there just aren't good jobs out there.
Right.
Like, she's going to have to probably take a massive pay cut. Like, massive, which will be way less than what she's making on unemployment.
Hopefully the spring things will turn around.
Yeah, I don't have faith. Not in people, not in the American government, not in politicians.
I
have faith in God, but that's about it.
I have to try. You have to believe.
I mean, not in people, you don't.
Well,
in fact, if you bet on yourself, you're going to be much better off in the end
with
every
people
time.
Today is you can't touch them.
Right.
COVID's got that goddamn capital shut down.
Right.
You can't lobby. Man, when I'd go lobby, you know how I'd go? I'd go to the top of that office building. I'd start on the top floor, and we'd work our way all the way down to the floor.
Really?
That's because whenever we had to go see somebody, we had to see everybody. And they would call and say, they call ahead, they're coming down. If you better get out of there. If you don't want to see them, you better get on out of there.
Interesting.
But no, that's where a lot of our battles, unfortunately,
that makes sense, though. Yeah,
we had to get support from legislators.
And there's got to be strategic ways of how you go about that. That makes perfect sense.
And now you can't even talk to them.
Right.
Now you can't call them. You can't talk to them.
You can call them.
Yeah, but they don't answer the phone that much.
No.
I'll go right to voicemail.
So I got all 3 of their offices on the phone when I was pissed off back in August.
Was it a local state rep or a city councilor or what?
It was all of them. So I got the mayor's office on the phone. I got the governor's office on the phone. I got the Ilhan Omar's office on the phone because she's my rep.
Oh, yep.
They all picked up.
Oh, that's good.
I chewed their asses out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was the only one, so it just fell on deaf ears. But you only need a handful of people to start making phone calls to make change happen. That's what I found out from Omar. I think his name's Omar. That doesn't sound right now that I'm saying it. But dude that runs Surly, he was telling us how he was talking to senators trying to get a bill passed. And they're like, honestly, you're going to need a lot of phone calls, like a lot of pressure to make this happen. And he's like, okay, how much is that? And she's like, on a bill like this, 6 to 12. And he's like, oh, I'll get you 6 to 12.
Yeah.
All he did is every tour that he did for his brewery, he told his people exactly that.
Right.
And everybody went home that night and called. So for months,
he had a platform.
For months, she had a dozen new people calling every week.
A good
for
process.
months.
A good process is always a good plan.
And that bill got passed pretty quick. Like the first time it got introduced, it got passed. And he changed the laws. He changed the game for every brewery in the state.
Wow.
So yeah, again, another thing like that. And it's like when Omar did that, I understood a lot more about how it happens.
Yeah.
So I'm less surprised about that. There's that much of a strategy that you would start at the top and work your way down. But yeah, I just found it incredibly inspiring that you were actually able to pull that whole deal off. But you eventually separated from that group, and that group is fucking weird now, dude.
No,
like,
well,
now B96
you
changes their
real
format every 5 to 10 years.
The real deal there is the fault is with John Linder, the guy who sold us the tower.
John Linder, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, he's not resting in peace. I can tell you that. He's recently passed.
Well, and the Pole Lads had a piece of that.
Well, the Pole Lads took it in the shorts too, because when John Linder lied to us and didn't tell us about the local issues that were there, we had to turn around and do the same thing to Radio 1. And then Radio 1.
What were the local issues you're talking about?
So
you're talking about the building you bought and the tower you put up.
We basically purchased a new tower. Is what we paid $20 million for, and it was a tower that this John Linder cost him $2 million to make and sold it for $20 million. But they did not follow the conditional use permit out in Carver County. So it was built literally right on top of a softball field. One of the guardrails was 5 feet from the center field fence. It was swamplands. There's literally swamplands. They built it. And you go out there, and there's nothing but cornfields in every direction. How the hell they ended up building this tower there is still in question by a lady out in Carver County today, 22 years later.
Like as a marvel of engineering, or just sheer corruption on how
sheer corruption on how they do shit out in Carver County. And it sucks because I have to relive it every time it comes up, but it keeps coming up.
Sure.
It continually comes up.
You gotta go to fucking, what is it, court? Not court, but like what do they call those?
It's a political resolve at this point. The legal time frame should have happened within like 3 years, but I was
so now they're talking. So now they're gonna have to pay out some money and move it or something.
We don't know. Well, that all Pole Lads took all that on. See, Steve Woodbury was their guy when that Jim Wycor, the broker, insisted that we hire because they are all part of this cover up. So when I'm sitting in the car with Steve Woodbury, and he gets a phone call about a community meeting. I'm the community affairs director, and he's telling me it's none of my goddamn business. None of my business what's going on out in Carver County with our tower. I said, are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? I got 10 years into this. There's an issue out there, and you're keeping it from me? Oh, I was so fucking pissed. I'm still fucking pissed.
I would be too, man.
So meanwhile, that's why we sold immediately.
You and your group,
our group,
because you were a minority holder,
these
right?
issues were big. I mean, TVs and radios were going bzzz out in this Hollywood Township neighborhood because of our tower, and so then Radio 1 had to lie and sold it to the Pole Lads, and then the Pole Lads had to get it off that tower, and they tried to move to St. Louis, and they got St. Louis Park, and they got blocked from there too. So it cost them a lot of money
because the Pole Lads
and now they just got out of the business.
The Pole Lads weren't exactly a generous group. They're known for being Jewier than I am. And I'm a Jew, so I can make that joke. And I'm pretty Jewy about my Jewishness. So, and I'm talking about money, folks. But they were known for being pretty tight.
You know what story I never told you was my last meeting with the Pole Lads before they dropped the B96 deal, because they had summoned me in.
Go on.
They had they had summoned me into their lawyers. They summoned me to their office, their lawyer's office, and said, "Bring your lawyer." So I brought Greg Gray, who's a friend of mine. He is a lawyer, but he was my Million Man March political. We got a lot of political advisors.
Got a lot of degree.
he wasn't my lawyer to represent me. He was just a lawyer. So we go to that meeting, and they're like, well, we can't, if he's not here to represent you, this meeting has to end right here and now. I'm like, oh, the hell it does, you know. So that's where I finally got to speak my mind. So then I went and contacted the Johnny Cochran law firm of Minnesota, and their law firm ultimately.
What did he have, like franchises across the country?
Sure shit did. And the guy was down in Lakeville. So
was there any affiliation, or was it just a name licensing?
He was affiliated to Johnny Cochran's law firm. He was, and so he was.
So it wasn't. They didn't just rent his name like fucking Jimmy Buffett's.
No, they were
Margaritaville.
They were part of their deal. So he and I then went back about a month or two later, and it was Terry Moore, their lawyer, who was buying all this shit the whole time. There was 2 men and 2 women on the pole outside, and it was me and the cat. So we walk into this conference room like this, and I had my B96 coat. So I took off my B96 coat, and I put it on the back of my chair. And just when they were going to start getting into all the ways they were going to sue me, I flipped my seat around. They're staring at the B96, and I'm sitting there counting 1, 2, 3, 4. I count to 60, and then I turn around and say, "Okay, we can start this now." And that's how the meeting got started. And then they told me all the different ways they were going to sue me for, you know. And I really, you know, I'm like the president. I'll push an envelope. I'll push it right to the edge. I won't push it over the edge. I'm good at that. Right. So, and we blocked them from donating the tower to Hollywood Township. After they got off it, they were going to get a big tax write-off at the end of the year. And I went out to a Hollywood Township meeting and said, "Are you sure you got the liabilities assessed?" You know, and so I kind of messed that up for them too. But so ultimately, the end of the resolve was they dropped the B96 call letters, and that's when they went to Go 96, and that's when I got off their ass, and that's all that.
And you probably got a nice little probably got a nice little chunk for that.
Well, the only
nice
chunk
little check
that was the very first one. Yeah, that was the big check. We'll see if anything ever happens out in Carver County, because what should happen today is Dave Linder, John Linder's son, you know, who, you know, made $17 million off of fucking us over. Is this like
Linder's Linder?
Nope, it's Radio Mankato out of Mankato, Minnesota. Linder Broadcasting.
Okay.
It's his kid.
So nothing to do with Linder's
if his kid really gave a shit about his dad resting in peace and these issues to go away, he would take some responsibility and not have Carver County have to take that responsibility. But
what's his name?
Dave Linder.
Okay, that's your Cam. You can talk right to him right there.
Dave Linder. Give us a call. Bring some resolve to the people of Carver County.
Yeah, you piece of shit.
Your dad, swear to God, never told us about these issues. He was legally liable to tell us about these issues. In our 30-day due diligence portion of our sale, he chose not to and cover it up.
Yeah, you little bitch.
True story. True story. Yeah. So hold on. Maybe he'll man up one day. I remain optimistic there too.
I doubt it.
He's a lawyer in Florida today.
I'm just being a little shit.
That's the same sentiment you said at the beginning that'll prove itself false too.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is really, I don't have faith.
I would still be in the radio business today if all that shit didn't hit the fan.
It's wild, dude, because I secretly had my whole life, you know, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a fireman, then I wanted to be a baseball player, and then I wanted to be a football player, and then I wanted to be a musician. But throughout that entire time, I also wanted to be on the radio the entire time. I was like, dude, it'd be super fucking cool to be on the radio. That seems like the coolest job. And that was secretly a tiny obsession, or not obsession, a tiny motivator for doing this podcast. Because it's always been something I kind of wanted to do anyways. So I was like, well, fuck it. Instead of going to school and trying to get a broadcast degree, I'll just do like I always do and figure it out.
Work your way through it.
We're getting there. It's getting pretty good. So yeah, it's just wild, man, because you've had a pretty adventurous life, and you were also on the team. And I don't think, no disrespect, but I don't think you guys actually ended up being a factor in the new Vikings push but you were one of those organizations that never let it go. Because I know, just because I followed that thing so closely, regardless of your involvement with it, I remember watching nothing happening on that front.
Stadium?
Yeah. Until the Metrodome collapsed and the Vikings put their own group together, then it was like, it's going to happen. Which was kind of disingenuous because it was like there was a lot of people pushing for a new stadium. And one of my favorite things, and we didn't really talk about this on the last podcast because I knew I was going to end up getting into it again, but coming from your perspective, you can actually back this up. So like, the amount of revenue that comes from these stadiums is hard to fathom, and keeping a team is the important part. Meaning, a lot of citizens felt like we were being hijacked by the owners because they were threatening to move the team if we didn't build them a new stadium with taxpayer dollars, and people are like, "Fuck that! They're billionaires. Let them build their own." Okay, maybe they were.
Yeah. That's one thing I have to commend the governor Dayton at the time. You know, Dayton dropped the ball on our community issue, but he was definitely there, part of the main reason why the Vikings are still in Minnesota today. But the Wilfs really had a lot of patience. They didn't want the Vikings to leave Minnesota, so they were overly patient. It turned out to be an ugly political process, how that bill ultimately got done.
And I want to get into that. But the motivation for getting it done, it is money. And so just briefly, without getting too nerdy, insider baseball on the fucking tax laws and shit, but briefly, there's one thing, because everybody understands you create jobs because all of those people that have to be in the stadium and work, we get that. Those people pay income tax, we get that. And then everybody understands those peripheral businesses right around, the bars, the restaurants, things like that. We understand that. The parking ramps, the parking lot attendants, we get all of that.
Yep.
But there's also the jock tax. So when a visiting team comes in and plays in US Bank Stadium, they pay their income tax on their game checks in the state of Minnesota. Now in football, it's one thing. A lot of the teams are very similar, but in baseball, when you have the $200 million payroll of the New York Yankees versus the $80 million payroll of the Twins, we want the Twins there because we get the Yankees 3 times a year or whatever the hell it is. You know what I mean? Like that, it's a money thing. And so you invest the money, you get that money back in, but it was supposed to go in Andover, and the sneaky, shady politics that went down with the Star Tribune to bring that thing back to downtown. It's like we got half of what we were supposed to get, because you want to talk about the peripheral businesses and all that. That shit was supposed to be out in Andover. We were supposed to have a completely new community.
You know why I didn't
Star Tribune, they had land, right? Explain it.
I'll tell you. Well, it was the armory up there, right off of 35E and 35W. This huge armory up there that the government back in the 70s had paid multiple millions of dollars to do the cleanup, and all of it got diverted somewhere else, and there was no cleanup. So the tag just to clean up that lot was so high and significant, plus all the old stories of why the money that went there went somewhere else, was just a quagmire. So that's why it go there. It was, but everybody knew a year before it even got done that it was going to have to be in Minneapolis at the same spot. That was
because there was some shady shit that went down with the Star Tribune forcing the hand of the politicians to make it go in downtown because they had that dead land, because the newspaper, because when the newspaper business was huge, Star Tribune was one of the biggest real estate owners in the city. And so they had all this area for all their printing presses and all the obvious things. But then when that all collapsed, Star Tribune got stuck with all that land. And instead of offloading it over the last 20 years, they somehow convinced the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota to force them to build the stadium downtown and purchase that land from Star Tribune. One of the shadiest things I've ever seen. And it wasn't even a secret. That's the most fucked up part about it. This isn't a conspiracy. This was written about in papers. This was talked about on the radio. I'm not breaking any news here. This was well known.
Yeah.
It was one of the shadiest things because we were supposed to have an entire new development out in Andover. Yeah, like we were supposed to have all of that, and it's like, oh, what do you do downtown? Anything you fucking want. But we lost our tailgating space. We lost all this other stuff. There's so much shit. And then we bring the Super Bowl in, and people are like, this is worse than when it was here in the Metrodome because it's even more cramped than when we were here in 91 as far as the NFL is concerned. It's like the leadership in Minnesota can be so fucking short-sighted. And the corruption here, people think, oh, Minnesota. And it's like, dude, there's just as much corruption here as anywhere else.
A lot of head turning.
A lot of it, man.
I just call it head turning.
A lot of checks going in.
Just go look over there.
A lot of checks going in Blazers during hugs.
I see nothing. Sergeant Schultz.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's
so
disgusting,
it wasn't a pretty bill, and I felt bad for a lot of the people lobbying against it because, it just happened. And if the powers that be, the powers that be want something done, it gets done.
I mean, I'm glad they did it, but.
And as am I. But it wasn't pretty, I tell you that.
And the user fee on my cigarettes to pay for the damn thing never went down.
Well, and then of course us ticket season holders, again, it's like buying real estate.
Yep.
That all came in after the fact.
Yep.
I didn't like that too much. But,
yeah, that's a money grab by the Wills because they didn't have to do that.
Right. So, but so another season come, another season gone. Where's Denny Green when you need him?
No, I love it. These are the seasons when I become a fan again. And I'm being genuine. I'm being serious here because I've seen some of the most brilliant coaching from Mike Zimmer I've seen the entire time he's here. And I know people are laughing and going, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Go back and watch the football podcasts,
what
guys.
Happened to our blitzing? Why is he stopped blitzing?
My fucking predictions and my knowledge of football has been proven on record. We've got football podcasts up.
You do go on record.
And I'm telling you, dude, and that shit came to light, dude. The people I picked, the guys I doubted, Carson Wentz, did he just get cut? I think he just got cut. He wanted to part ways, but I said he was a bust when people are like, I don't know, man. He's fucking going to the Pro Bowl, blah, 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 13-3. No, Nick Foles won them that Super Bowl. They would have lost in the playoffs if Carson Wentz was healthy that year.
Oh, it's nice to see New England lose.
But no, here's what I'm saying is our blitz is gone because Mike Zimmer has two problems to deal with. He had to simplify his scheme from running that double A gap blitz, which is a glorified cover 3, okay, and he had to go to a classic cover 2. And he's constantly having to keep 4 defensive backs or 5 defensive backs back in coverage because they're so young and so raw. In a normal Mike Zimmer defense, none of those players would see the field except for special teams until next year or the year after. Right. Or maybe in extreme nickel.
So next year we're going to be looking much better.
Much better.
Have the ability to blitz more because that's
the thing. We don't have Michael Pierce. We don't have Daniil Hunter. We don't have Anthony Barr. We don't have Eric Kendricks. Yeah. And without a crowd, I'm sorry to say it, the Vikings just aren't that great of a team.
Man, that's significant. That 12th player, significant.
It matters. It just like I thought it would. It matters for the bad teams, and it really doesn't matter for the good teams. Like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs don't need a crowd.
Yeah,
they're dominating in empty stadiums regardless. Right. Like it doesn't matter. They're awesome. Aaron Rodgers doesn't need a crowd to be a good quarterback, but the Vikings defense is a unit that needs the crowd, and it's unfortunate, but. It is what it is.
It's always next year.
I'm looking forward to another draft pick. I want a real left tackle. Everyone keeps talking guard. And I'm like, Riley Reif's got to go, man. We need a real left tackle in the draft.
Right.
Go find a decent guard in free agency that you can afford. Trade Kyle Rudolph. Get a 3rd or a 4th round pick, maybe even a 2nd if he's still got some years left in him.
Some good tight ends.
We get all those guys I mentioned back. Kendricks, Barr, Hunter, Pierce.
Yeah.
Plus some more draft picks. Vikings are going to be a scary good team next year because you get my biggest issue with this football team is Gary Kubiak. I see
no creativity.
Exactly.
Where are your trick plays? I mean, for the love of God, run on first down on the very first play of a game. I mean, let your offensive lineman go hit somebody as opposed to being hit on the first play of the game. Give them that right and that privilege. Then go to your pass.
Yeah, I think you
his
nailed
play
it. There's no
call is
creativity.
frustrating. There's no trick plays. Remember when Moss would catch ball and flick it back? I mean, none of that's going on. There's so much opportunity. There should be at least one trick play per game in every per season. If you could do 2 a game, that would be great. But there should be a different one. They should be able to have at least 16 trick plays in their arsenal.
And if you don't have trick plays, then fine. But I want to see creative, adaptive game planning. So if you're going up against the fucking Buccaneers, yeah, no problem, dude. If you're going up against the Buccaneers or the Bears, who say we're going to shut down the running game and we're going to make Kirk Cousins beat us, say okay, and throw the ball 30, 40 times. If mid-game you realize, oh, wait, Bruce Arians didn't decide to shut down the run. He's shutting down the deep pass. Yeah. Okay. Figure it out.
Switch it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Like Tom Brady when he comes into the Vikings, into the Metrodome. I don't remember when it was, but Pat Williams, Kevin Williams, the whole Williams wall, the whole deal. And they literally, no one could run against us that year. So Bill and Tom, they come into the Metrodome and they go, okay, so we just won't. And he passed the ball 50 times, and they destroyed us. They said, fine, you prevent people from running the football, then we just won't do it, and we'll just attack everything else. And they did.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand Kirk Cousins isn't Tom Brady, but Jesus fucking Christ. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. It is high-level intellectual football. It's attention to detail. It's all the little nuanced things. You're dealing with the talent that you have, not the scheme that you want. I get that.
Right.
These are all football 101. But at the same point in time, the definition of insanity is pounding your head against the wall,
right,
expecting a different fucking result.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to me when you see Kirk Cousins not throwing the ball when you're clearly seeing if you just get him a little bit of time,
yeah,
these guys can get open,
right,
and they make plays.
Right.
So stop making, and especially in a season where it doesn't look like you're going to make the playoffs,
right,
stop grinding. I'm telling you, it reminds me of that year Adrian Peterson got injured in Washington
on a play that did not matter
at the end of the season. Correct.
Right. I'm with you there too.
That's what I think is going to happen. I think Delvin's going to get a serious injury here in the next 2 games.
And it won't mean shit.
Yep, exactly. Just take the fucking 7-9 season. Don't fire Zimmer. Don't fire Spielman. It's honestly, none of this is their fault. Like, yes, I understand this is the bed they made, but these guys are great at what they do, and you just have to let them continue to build.
You got to have the Holmgren patience. The same patience Holmgren had with Brett Favre. Remember all those INTs Favre threw for 3 seasons? His first 3 seasons, Holmgren was a patient coach.
And Andy Reid. Andy Reid never won a Super Bowl in Philly. Andy Reid didn't win a Super Bowl in KC until he did just last year.
Right.
It's not as if...
It's not an easy task to win a Super Bowl.
Right, and great coaches can go... Bill Cowher went his entire career without winning one. As soon as he won one, he retired.
Yep.
He's like, fuck it, I'm out.
It's not an easy thing to do.
So,
not an easy thing
exactly. And like... 7-9 is a bad season for the Vikings. That's a good thing. A bad season for a lot of teams is 1-15, 3-13, 5-11, and they have them often.
Right.
We will not be in the top 10 of the draft. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to be in the top 10, and if you are, it better only be once every 20 to 30 years.
If you have a shitty season.
Exactly. So my point is I'm actually more of a fan this year, looking forward to next year, than I have been. It reminds me of, again, I think it was 2016. We finished the season 7-9 or 8-8, and all off season I kept saying, "This is a Super Bowl team. This is a Super Bowl team," and that was when we had Bradford, because Teddy was already down.
Yep.
But that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm really getting at here is how I measure this team is what did they have to deal with. So in 2016, Teddy Bridgewater essentially died on the football field in a non-contact injury. His leg just fell off and he almost bled to death.
Yep.
We pull off and get Sam Bradford, But then we had a bunch of O-linemen get injured. Norv Turner quit that season. Mike Zimmer injures his eye, misses a game, and our special teams coach Mike Prefer almost beats Dallas, who I think that season went 15-1. I think that was that big season with Dak Prescott, and we almost beat them. All of that shit, and we still ended up finishing like 7-9 or 8-8. And I was like, next season we are going to be fucking good. And sure as shit, we went 13-3 Minneapolis Miracle, and we stopped. We quit. We quit in Philly. But this is what I think is going to happen next year. I think it's a mirror image of that, because everything we went through this year, leading up to what I've seen from our coaching staff and their ability to groom players, like give them talent,
ability to win on the road.
I used to hold them so accountable for their lack of ability to identify and draft wide receivers, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 out of nowhere, they got Diggs, Thielen, and Jefferson.
Right.
You know, and they've really only missed once, and yeah, it was a big miss. Treadwell, because he's a first rounder, but other than that, it's like BC Johnson, Chad Beebe, and they're going deep into the draft.
Right.
Okay,
it's nice to have a quarterback who can throw over 50 yards too.
And now that you've done all of this, guys, great job. This year, concentrate on offensive line, and find a quarterback. If it's not Nate Stanley, find a quarterback. Start making that. This is my problem with the organization as a whole. We do not prioritize the quarterback position in the draft. We just don't. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre still had a quarterback drafted every 3 to 4 or 5 years. They would draft a quarterback anywhere between the 2nd to 7th round, because it's a priority to them.
Just to have one there.
Yep. Exactly. And I think like it was either the year Aaron Rodgers got drafted or it was the year after they drafted another quarterback or two. I remember at one point in time they had 3 or 4 quarterbacks on that roster. And regardless of whether Brett Favre was there or not, I remember Matt Flynn was one of those quarterbacks, because I remember fucking Aaron Rodgers got injured, and Matt Flynn shows up and throws like 7 touchdowns in a game, or 6 touchdowns or some shit. He gets traded to Seattle the next year. Guess what? They just traded for a guy who looks like the next Joe Montana. And what do? They draft Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's a priority to them.
Right.
Andy Reid has Alex Smith.
Right.
Statistically a great quarterback. Trades up in the 1st round to get Patrick Mahomes. What? You see what I'm saying? Like, that's my problem.
It's an important role.
When is the last time, other than Christian Ponder, when's the last time the Vikings drafted a quarterback at all?
Which
really?
was a bust.
I mean, fuck, dude. It's rough.
At Cunningham from the roofing.
These aren't all my takes either. Shout out to Anwar. Some of these are his takes from our football podcasts. Just rehashing a lot of the shit that we kind of talked about and that we've seen unfold over the season. I'm going to start doing those more seriously next season. Because, dude,
the fantasy.
So we do the football podcast. We do fantasy shit, but then we also talk about the actual games and like players and like the real side of football. So we try to do both. And one thing I'm going to do next year is I'm going to create my own DraftKings group, so viewers can jump in and we can all compete.
Interesting.
With each other. You know, it'd be like $1 to jump into our tournament. So if you're watching that morning, you can jump in. It'll be fucking cool, dude. It'll be awesome.
And you pick your team right there. Put your squad on the field. Interesting.
So we've only been going about an hour and 15 minutes. What else do you want to get into, man? Like, what are you up to now and shit?
Well, today I'm working on a bill for the Minnesota legislature that actually we tried tagging on probably 8 Viking Stadium bills at the legislature. That's why I know exactly how many bills it took and how long it's been on it. That was a 15-year struggle politically.
Wow.
And but with my work at the Urban League, it didn't take me long to figure out the solution to our cultural ills in America, and specifically here in Minnesota. And it's simply a lack of resources and a lack of participation at the Minnesota legislature to make that happen. And so this bill that used to be called the Minnesota American Reconciliation Partnership, today is called the Injustice Correction Engagement Authority. And it's a resource-driven bill. It's a statewide bill. It affects citizens up in Duluth. It affects citizens in Rochester, Mankato, and of course, it works on health, education, economic development, and most importantly, public safety issues here in the metro. But what's unique and significant about this bill is that no longer will legislators from Worthington or Ely, Minnesota, or Moorhead, Minnesota, make decisions on where resources go in North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, St. Paul. It'll be done by committees of professionals in the health industry, in education industry, entrepreneurs, and then, of course, law enforcement and public safety people closer to the ground within the African-American community. So it brings autonomy and accountability to our collective tax dollars and how they get spent from the legislature back into the community. So it's a resource-driven bill that simply chips off a piece of our biannual taxpayers' expenditures, and it kicks it out in a different process than the legislative process. So it is innovative, and it is a big step, but it's a step that will stabilize our inner cities. A stronger African-American community is a stronger American community in any one of our cities across the country. That's the bottom line. How do we get there is the question. Well, we've been trying this way for a long time, but we're not getting the job done. We need to begin to look outside the box and try a new process for a generation or two so that we can fix the probably 40% of the chronic areas of poverty and oppression that we still have in our cities and our state. And this bill does that.
How?
It's well thought out to begin with, because you have educators spending dollars on education issues. You have health professionals who deal in mental health and all the different health areas, spending these resources within their own community locally by professionals in that community. Entrepreneurs, same way. You've got successful entrepreneurs in the community who are already...
So you're not talking... Okay, so I think I understand. So basically, the idea is not where the money's coming from, it's how the money is being distributed, and instead of some random asshole out in the middle of nowhere deciding on a statewide level, it's saying, okay, here's the deal. This amount of money is going to Minneapolis. We're going to let people more on the front lines
determine where these resources go
instead of them.
Consistently. Yes. See, because
that's smart, because if they see an issue, they can pivot quickly. They can go, hey, you know what? Next quarter, when we get our next money, we're going to divot a little bit more over here because
there's no rhyme or reason to it. This bill brings a plan and a process for success. The way we do it now is we'll fund health for a little while, then we'll stop funding it, and then we'll go fund over here for a little while, then we'll go fund over here for a little while. Meanwhile, nothing ever really is getting consistently done, and everything is staying the same.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, that African Americans spend a significant amount of tax money in that because of our participation at the legislature and our inability to chair committees. And, I would even question some of the abilities of some of the legislatures that are even there to bring back and deliver tax resources, which is what their responsibility is to do. That process doesn't fare out for the majority of African Americans across the state. We just have to acknowledge that. We can acknowledge that through all the disparities that are out, that have been documented over the years, and that until we change the way we play the game, that we're not going to stabilize our communities. Mm-hmm. And right now, we need to stabilize our communities. We need to educate our communities. We need healthy communities. And this bill will do a much better job than what's been going on over the last 4 governors' administrations.
I mean, in theory, it makes sense. Usually when you localize decisions,
right,
they're more effective. I mean,
there's more accountability there, too.
Right. Yeah, that's my biggest issue with like how we fund education is the money goes up and then it comes back down. And
it goes to a big bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So it very rarely gets to the classroom.
Right.
You know, and no longer, and this is where the Democrats don't like this bill, because they're the ones, and their organizations are the ones who've received all this money,
Right.
and that is supposed to be carrying out these initiatives that don't get carried out to the way that they're supposed to get carried out.
Right.
The Republicans, they just quite frankly don't give a shit, but that's why I'm holding them to a higher standard, because at the end of the day, if they ever want to win a governorship or a U.S. Senate seat again, they better do right by this block of Minnesota voters that they continue to ignore.
Well, it seems like an easy sell for the Republicans. Like, listen, dude, we're trying to take more money, get more money, none of that shit. We just want authority over the money you're giving us so we can distribute it where we see fit. Like that should be an easy win, because it doesn't negatively affect them, and if they vote for it, it makes them look good. Whereas the Democrats, they actually benefit from that money.
Right. See, Democrats will still be there. They'll still be at the table.
Right.
They'll partner. If their organization is servicing 60% of African American kids, then they can even be in line for these resources. But they're not going to be the power and control mechanisms that go along with all that.
Right.
That will be removed, and trust and validity of American citizenship and citizens would take that role. And it can be done very easily, but I think it's going to take a big push from the Republican Party. And I've called out their chair on this on multiple times. You know, people who refuse to sit down and talk to you about this know it's probably a pretty good idea, but they just want to keep that power and control. Right. But your satisfaction of having your power and control is creating problems in my community. It's creating gunshots in my neighborhoods, you know. It just, things have to change, and this is the plan. And it doesn't matter if this bill was done in 1968 or whether this bill is done in 2034. The next 15 to 30 years will be a much better, stabler, and successful community for whatever state is the first state that takes this on. And Minnesota, we're probably one of the top 5 worst states here in the country.
For what?
For life, as living as an African American in our 50 states. Minnesota is ranked.
How so?
Well, we ranked 2nd one year. We ranked 4th last year through home ownership. There's like 10 factors.
Yeah, what are those facts? That's what I'm. Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
We could Google them right now.
What do I look up?
Worst state for African Americans to live in.
No, I want to see the metrics that they measure that by.
That's the Google. It'll take you to that report. Yeah, we are the best. I call us the second best oppressors of black people.
See, dude, come on, man. I live here, dude, and like we have
collectively, not individually, collectively, and statistics bear that out. Statistics bear that out. I don't bear that out.
You know what Mark Twain said, though? There's 3 types of lies. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. Like, I don't buy this stat bullshit for a second.
I think you look at
that was somebody trying to
incarceration rates across Minnesota and across America. And I think people's first question is, where does this money come from? Well, you know, I understand for the military industrial complex for us to do what we do around the world, but I don't see much validation for our criminal industrial complex that feeds and eats tax money, then has to have criminals and inmates in their system for it to survive. That's a flawed American system that has to be assessed, analyzed, and picked apart, and that's where you start with these resources.
So it looks like there's
Iowa was number 1 last year.
There's 4 major metrics that they're looking for. They're looking for income gap, education gap, home ownership disparity, and Black American incarceration rate per 100,000. So, dude, I'm just saying, man.
And
like,
where's Minnesota?
On this one, they're 5th. But here's the thing, dude, is what I want to know is if this is actual oppression or if this is a very, very, very friendly grabbing of the stats. Because the people I know in the communities I've lived in Minneapolis, Most of these motherfuckers have zero desire to own a home. They choose not to go to college.
Their parents didn't, because their parents didn't.
But it's not that no one's letting them.
What our generation is dealing with.
But oppression is very specific. Oppression is someone holding you down. No one is preventing black people from owning a home or going to school in Minnesota.
Actually, there was a little thing called redlining that was preventing people from owning homes in areas. I mean, in Minnesota. Of course, in Minnesota. Yes, in Minnesota. Everywhere.
I mean, I know about redlining.
Common practice.
I know about redlining because it's still an issue in D.C. and it's still an issue in Chicago.
It's common practice. And education. Did you ever see 100-Year Slave? The slave, the northern slave.
When was there redlining in Minnesota?
Oh, I couldn't tell you exactly what it does, but there was a point where you couldn't go across 38th Street over south. You shouldn't back in the 60s,
50s,
60s. Yeah, you don't want to be caught across 38th Street. After dark. I mean, 38th Street was a red line district. I mean, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to fix generations of issues by doing things differently for the next 3 generations. That's all this
is.
It sounds, we're just pivoting. We're pivoting the way we do
things. And that's cool,
things.
But it sounds to me like, looking at this, it sounds to me like a lot of things, a lot of people have already come to this conclusion, which is I can't give anybody enough money to convince them to get their kids to go to school and get an education so they can get out and own a home. And if you do those 3 things, the stats show, if we want to talk about stats, that your odds of being arrested are dramatically lower. I can't do anything to get people in my neighborhood to do anything. I can't give them money. I can't hold them accountable. They've got to decide to fix that. So the question is, to me, is the money's already there. I'm not complaining about funding it with taxes. That's not what I'm getting at. My question is, are you saying that by giving these people in these local communities the authority to distribute this money in a more accurate, efficient way, that somehow it's going to affect those 4 metrics that they're basing this off of?
Without a doubt.
Because you understand, those 4 metrics are extremely
let's look at the 4 components. Let's look at so is the bill. There's 4 major components around the bill. Education, right? That's one of your components. Income, that's economic development. You got to have
just pull that closer.
Job creation, job stability and profit sharing. You have to have healthy citizens to be able to do that. And then public safety, if people are out gang banging and shooting up, then they're not doing those things. Yeah. So you have to be able to provide different opportunities.
but then they're incarcerated if they're out gang banging. It just, to me, it just seems like and I'm not shooting down your bill. I'm not shooting down this idea at all. I'm not shooting it down at all. Is what I'm saying. I'm trying to get in. I don't think there's a direct answer here, so I'm not trying to get you in a gotcha moment either.
No, but I think what you have to do is you have to separate yourself from state government, because I believe that our cultural issues are going to be fixed at the state level, not at the county level, not at the city level, but
isn't that what you're asking to do, though? Is allow those funds to be dictated at the city level, not at the state level?
No, from the state and the metro.
The funds are coming from the state, but you want to take the power away from the state legislators to distribute those funds,
and let the regional in the north and the region in the south, and there's actually committees of 5 in the metro on the health, committee of 5 on the education, committee of 5 in the public safety, and a committee of 5 on the economic development. And in the north, up in Duluth and Moorhead, you got committees of 3 in the health, 3 health professionals, 3 educators, 3 entrepreneurs, 3 public safety people. Same thing in the south, Mankato, Rochester. You got 3 that sit on those committees. So those are going to be the people that will ultimately be assessing RFPs to do this type of work to strengthen this from the bottom up our communities.
But you understand how these 4 stats to be used to say Minnesota is one of the most, literally the most oppressive states in the country. I find to say that using those 4 stats I consider that to be incredibly disingenuous.
Well,
and I'll tell you why.
There's another one that has at least 9 or 12
sure,
other areas.
But I'm already. This is what
just of those.
But this is what I suspected before I even looked at those metrics, and this is what concerns me: is these type of metrics, because I can do all kinds of crazy shit. Now, here's my point: is there definitely is a lot of corruption and a lot of poverty in the city of Minneapolis. If we could fix literally North Minneapolis, just North Minneapolis, if we could figure out how to get these people to be successful and wealthy, it would trickle down to South Minneapolis just by natural attrition. It would just go down there. It would go down to South Minneapolis, and that would solve the vast majority of problems in the entire state. But what I'm saying is what I'm seeing, and this is anecdotal, but I've been in this city for a long time. I have traveled the country, but not like you. I never stayed in any area. I just stopped and played shows and shit. I've spent most of my time really understanding Minneapolis and the people in it. The people I have found, and this is why those stats disturb me greatly. This is anecdotal, but I'm telling you, this is like, I'm speaking from the heart here.
Carry on.
Every single black person I have ever met who was born and raised in Minnesota has a very similar view on almost everything as I do. Meaning, what is racism? Do we have racial issues? Where did the problems lie? The music, the culture, the sports, like we're like the same type of person. The only difference is the color of our skin. They also say, like, Minnesota's fucking awesome. Like, no, Minnesota's a great place. Like, blah, 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 blah.
Many positive
However,
aspects.
almost 100% of the people I hear complain about Minnesota are people that came here from somewhere else. Chicago, Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana. They're imports. Okay, now the reason that matters to me is because I don't know a single, and I know a lot of people, but I don't know a single person born and raised in Minnesota who is any of the 3 issues we just talked about, unless they just choose to, like my buddies. Like, I don't want to fucking own a home. You know what I mean? Is that a sign that it's bad if a bunch of people just go, dude, I don't want to own a home? No, it's not.
No,
now here's where I'm going with this. Okay. But if you get a bunch of people who move in from Chicago and Louisiana, where they have super fucked up educational systems, even worse than ours, and they don't have high school diplomas, and they come here with criminal records, and they come here with all that shit, our data is polluted because that ain't even our people. We didn't raise those people.
Right.
They're one of us because they're Americans, but that's not us.
Right.
And that's what I seen during the riots and the looting, too, just to kind of do a quick little time lapse to put it back in some real context. The fucking people down there rioting and looting, every single person that they have arrested for starting fires and doing bad shit, not one of them has been from Minneapolis.
Nope, I understand.
They were from the suburbs. So my point is, I don't buy that stat. I don't buy those studies because, and I get it, it's anecdotal, but I live here on the front lines, and that's not what I see. The people I see doing dirt here, the criminals I see here, aren't Minnesotans. They're people from Chicago. They're people from out of state. And that doesn't mean every person from Chicago is a criminal, because I know personally a couple of my neighbors from Chicago are some of the best people I know. Yep. But you get my point here.
Well, I would only add that 60% of African Americans are doing well here in Minnesota. I don't test that at all.
How many white people are doing well?
Well,
because I bet you it's about 60%.
No, I would say at least
might even be
70 to 80% probably. Yeah, I mean,
I
just think there's stronger networks there. There's not.
Only if you count the Jews as white.
There's been fathers and families. 60 years of welfare kept fathers out of the home. Here in America and in Minnesota. So
are you against the welfare programs?
Those that
or the way they're structured.
If there were incentives, family-based incentive programs, I'd love that, because trying to reunify families and with our past history is tough.
That's what, and so that, and I've heard everybody speak on this, regardless of race. That fixes almost all of this shit by default. So like statistically, if you have a father in the home, you're like 70% more likely to graduate high school, which makes you 120% more likely to actually get a good job, which makes you like 300% less likely to ever be arrested or go to prison. Like,
right. The goal is stability.
So how do we do that?
Working. You do it by pivoting and changing the way that our legislative body has been working over.
So we
got to
fix the welfare system. We don't get rid of it, but we got to incentivize it to bring men and families back together in the home.
I think the creativity of these committees the solutions will all come within the citizens coming around these tables, coming around these issues, and coming around these initiatives. But it all starts at the legislature. The will to want to do it. They have to have a political will to really want to fix things. And if they don't have the political will, then that you're not even going to get started. That's where we're at right now. I don't truly believe that folks really, really want to fix things or believe they can fix things. Number one, they have to believe they can fix things, and then they have to get behind a plan that's smart, that makes sense.
What if
that is consistent?
Let me ask you this: have you ever met somebody who's on benefits and they're working, because you're allowed to have a part-time job and all that kind of shit? You're allowed to have some money coming in. You know, you're not forced to sit at home and do nothing in order to collect benefits. But I've known several people where they had to turn down promotions, they had to turn down full-time jobs because it put them just beyond this thick line where they lose all this other shit, and they actually are way worse off.
That's where simply,
why don't we make that a buoy? Why don't we make it a threshold? Like, no, we want you to go get that great job and all that kind of shit. So we're not going to suspend you day one. You've got, once you start getting it together, you've got a 2-year window, a buffer, stack some cash, buy a car, put it down.
$15 an hour movement comes from, because you want to take these people, you want to get them tax paying working jobs. You want, if there's a bonus or power sharing that can go on within these companies with these individuals, you want to do that too. You know, we've got target distribution. Even if we just manufactured wish brooms, you know, sold, we've got all the tools and
wish brooms.
We could do whatever. We have all the solutions here. People have to really want to do it. And I haven't seen that will for people to want to do that. But when that will is ready, this bill is ready.
Well, and that's what I've noticed, is that will only shows up under 2 situations:
unrest,
extreme inspiration, or extreme desperation.
Right.
It's one of the two.
Right.
And when your life is on the line, that's what I find interesting, is there's a lot of shit going down right now with businesses refusing to close here in Minnesota. And I've been waiting to talk to the right person about this on the podcast. And I think it's I'll
give you somebody who you should talk to on those issues.
Okay.
She went to high school with me.
Okay, I'll definitely have her on, because I want to hear from those. Because here's what I'm thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to put myself in that spot, right? So I got a bar or a restaurant. I got 14 employees. The government isn't helping, right? They're just not. So I'm about to get my fucking my car repossessed, or I can see the stress in my wife's eyes. You know, our marriage is breaking because we're on lockdown. All this shit's going, like, my life is falling apart, hypothetically. My question is, where's the threshold where and it's different for each person, right? So this is a rhetorical question. You don't necessarily have to answer. It's just one of those ones you kind of ask yourself. That's actually not a rhetorical question, but what do you lose before you decide, all right, fuck this, I'm opening my restaurant? Enough is enough. Do you lose your car? Do you wait till you lose your health insurance because you can't afford, because as a business owner, you know what I mean? Like,
everything should have frozen.
But it didn't. So let's not talk about the shoulds. It didn't. It didn't.
But when it happens again?
So let's go extreme, just to keep this analogy, believe it or not, simple. Let's go extreme to stay simple.
Okay.
The zombie apocalypse happens. Well, the CDC should have, the government should have, fine. But they didn't.
Right.
The zombie apocalypse is fucking here.
Right.
You've officially lost everything.
Right.
I can tell you, I'm not going to go kill another man or steal his food so I can eat. I'm going to figure out a way to eat or negotiate or befriend or do something or team up with some other people. However, if it's me and it's my kid and all I have is a can of soup for him to eat, and some other dude comes up and says, hey, I'm taking that can of food, I will murder that dude.
Right.
So that's my line, right? For
Right.
that extreme of a situation.
Right.
But let's now bring it back to reality. Maybe it's just you're afraid your wife is going to leave you. Maybe it's your house is going to get repossessed. Maybe the bank is going to foreclose on your
big
business.
Notes. There's notes.
They
have
should
to
have
be paid.
pressed pause, but they didn't. So at what point, like my buddy, I'm not going to drop any names on the podcast, but my buddy just had to sell his fucking motorcycle. That's not because he made bad financial decisions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there might be more than one person I know that just sold their motorcycle, so I don't want to.
Yeah.
It may not be you if you think it's you, but here's my question. Did that guy sell his fucking motorcycle because he had to pay his mortgage payment or his car payment because he's not allowed to go to work?
Yeah.
Should he have to? Because he didn't lose his job. You see what I'm saying? Like the government just shut down the economy. So how much are you supposed to give up? How much are you supposed to suffer before you're allowed to take back your own destiny and say, oh, government be damned, I'm opening my restaurant.
Right.
No one can answer this for everyone.
Right.
Because somebody will say, well, that's short-sighted because that dude is going to lose his liquor license now and all his people are going to be unemployed. He sacrificed everything for 2 days worth of income. Here's the thing. Some of these people were going to lose their business and go bankrupt anyways. You're seeing huge corporations drop. Yep. You're seeing huge corporations drop franchises and buildings and locations. You're seeing small businesses.
More leadership at the top.
Again, should have, but there isn't. So what are you allowed to do now? Because that's what I'm talking about. Is like I'm not trying to judge people. Like, wow, I don't know what that person's going
it's tough
through.
Because your numbers are spiking in the very same week. You know, our numbers nationally are 3,000, 4,000 a day. So all this is coming to head all at the same time. And what we are talking is happening real time. And I wish that bar owner, his note would have been put on hold for 6 months. And then whoever they owed their money to was also put on hold from the top all the way down. Mortgage payments, rent payments, all your major
everything.
That should have
just press pause.
Just press pause.
Yep.
Just press pause.
Press pause,
that
and
should
then
have happened. It didn't happen.
And you know what would have been beautiful is if they would have just pressed pause on everything, right, including like cable and phone bills and everything. Like just press pause on everything. We got to lay everybody off for a little bit.
Yep.
Then that little bit of unemployment money is enough because I don't have a mortgage payment.
Right.
I don't have a fucking cell phone.
I can
all
eat,
I got to do is
feed
eat.
my family.
All I got to do is eat, and I can just sit here and fucking watch TV.
Right.
It sucks because we're on pause, but no one's dying.
Right.
Instead, they were like, we're just going to pause some stuff.
And no
which
one's
sent
going
off
through
a
the
chain reaction of dominoes
today.
Exactly.
Right.
Like
who own big major businesses.
And in certain states, they've put eviction moratoriums up. Good thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, only if they also turned around and put a moratorium on foreclosures due to rentals.
On the guy's notes. I know. Because
they didn't do that in Minnesota.
I know.
The federal government put an eviction moratorium out there, but Minnesota did nothing to protect the homeowners.
Right.
So it's like you're one of those people, you saved up your whole life, you bought a fucking house technically a little nicer than what you could afford, but is what you decided to do was buy a duplex and sacrifice some privacy. And you're renting out that other side. And the only way you can actually make your entire mortgage payment is with that person's rent. Maybe you could float 3 months. Well, here we are 9 months later in the pandemic.
Yeah.
That person hasn't paid their rent. Now you're being foreclosed on because you can't evict that person and get a new renter. Right. Is that right? Is that the right thing to do? No. Everybody knows that these are the wrong things to do. So my question again isn't what we should have done because we're not doing those things. The question is when are these people allowed to say, I don't care what the government says. I got to eat. How much? Because people will go, well, that person's rich. That person's a millionaire.
Catch-22.
That person's a millionaire, which just means they're losing every problem you're going through. That rich person just has more zeros at the end of their bills.
Right.
It's just another zero or two. So they're going broke just as fast, if not faster.
Yeah,
because if they have any ethics, they're still paying their employees.
I wish I had the answer because it is a catch-22.
What would be the line for you if you're that business owner?
It's tough in the wintertime.
How much are you losing before you finally say fuck it and reopen? For me, I'm not losing anything.
I guess I would have spent my time dealing with my lenders and their lenders.
Once I miss that first car payment, once I miss one car payment, it's over. Fuck the government. unless you're going to cover my car note. Because if I lose my car, I can't get to work.
Right.
If I can't get to work, I can't manage my business. Then my business goes under regardless.
Yeah.
And then once all that falls apart, whose wife is going to stay with him? You know what I mean? Like, come on. This is America.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. No,
I'm taking the kids and I'm going to Florida.
I guess and it is tough for owners who own who have a brick and mortar. They have to have a note for and do have 14, 20 employees. Because, and I heard the Loon might be shutting down permanently. So, and Cheers, the historic Cheers in Boston, I hear is closing its doors finally due to this COVID. So, it is a reality. And I'm a public policy guy, so that's where my brain would have gone to right away. It was, how do we put a pause on everything? Because this could last a long time. And so that's why I say, well, what are we going to do next time it comes around? Because it's just important to be talking about next time it comes around as the UK, kicks out a whole nother, a whole nother strain of this.
I'm cool with talking about round 2 because I think it's going to happen again if it's not COVID.
So
if it's not COVID 20, because that's what it'll be, by the way, if it's real. If this new strain is really, really bad, it's like COVID 20 basically.
Right.
But
it
could be a new version of the flu. It could be some other weird disease we haven't even heard of. But I do agree it's a good idea to talk about that. But I'm not okay with talking about that.
I don't have an answer
while we neglect. And again, there isn't an answer for everyone. But this is what we need to be thinking about: is what is the line where you're allowed to go broke and suffer? How much are you supposed to lose before you're allowed to say, fuck that, I'm going to make some goddamn money?
I know where you're going. You're trying to get me to get that envelope pushing answer here. So what the bar owner does is he has parties in his parking lot, and he brings his bar outside, builds bonfire in the middle of the parking lot, and serves drinks in his parking lot, whether it's spring, summer, or fall. When I was in Indianapolis, we used to do these day parties Saturday. It'd start at 1 in the afternoon.
So I love that, because that's why
I would be throwing afternoon day parties.
So get creative.
Get creative and bring your bar outside and bring some bonfires out and move your party to the outside. You can still deliver food outside. You can put tables outside. My buddy who owns
50% coverage is the ratio. That's what the law is.
Yeah.
You can't have it 50% covered. So literally, like, you can do the math, ceiling, walls, everything, and 50% of it has to be open to the air in order for it to be considered outside. So this is the kind of shit I love, is like, okay, so what can we do? Right? How do we do it?
Right.
And that's where I do agree with people that are pissed, because I actually feel for those fucking business owners. It does seem a little fucked up that there's that many people packing those bars, and that those business owners, they were like, we're reopening, but with zero regulations.
Right. Maybe my buddy Jim.
They might as well have just had an orgy.
My buddy Jim has a hay barn, and it's huge. It's vacant. It's quasi outside. Well, maybe I move my bar and my liquor license over to that barn for a while.
Yeah, I wonder how that shit works. Get creative. That's the answer.
Fly under the radar for a little while, you know. And if you're not, the letter of the law states you can't open your bar. You're not opening your bar. You're opening a satellite bar.
Sure.
And that's gray area.
Call your lawyers, guys. Get creative.
Yeah, when in doubt,
that's the answer.
When in doubt, get creative and find ways to make that.
That really is the answer. Is you got to get creative
with anything, And as I look at this, that's why this Injustice Correction Engagement Authority, the injustice addresses our past, so we all can feel good when this is done. The correction is that we're making a conscious effort to correct things that we all know are happening, we all see is happening. We're all going to be engaging together, because it's still always all going to be a Minnesota thing. Our success is going to be a Minnesota success across the board, but our public safety will be much better, and we're suffering in the public safety realm most. Our law enforcement need this bill, and our people who live in your neighborhood need this bill, quite frankly. I don't have gunshots going off where I'm way south, but I sure know people who unfortunately hear gunshots far too often.
Daily,
weekly, daily,
multiple times each day,
unacceptable,
multiple times. Not like in my block's pretty chill. We got our
you're up a little bit too.
We regulate our block pretty tight. But
it's not rocket science to fix our problems. It's really not. It's a will to want to fix them. Yeah. We getting good calls? We taking calls today?
No, we're not taking calls. In fact,
next time.
Normally I decided I'm not reading chat anymore unless we actually take breaks. But just because I felt like the podcast was starting to take a weird turn, and I didn't like the direction it was going, so I decided we're not reading chat anymore. But
you better flip that cigarette around. I don't think it's going to work.
I am going to make an exception because my boy Anwar, who's been on the podcast many times, he chimed in.
What's happening?
Shout out to Anwar if you're still watching, buddy. Redlining was everywhere across the country. The mindset's wrong. Right, of course. Like how many of my friends have a 401k? Well, fuck, dude, I don't have a 401k. This is what I'm talking about. This is not just a racial issue.
That's the economic development stuff.
It's also a younger mindset. Like there's, dude, like Anwar is a couple years older than me. I think he's about to be 40. I'm 36. So we essentially would have been in high school at the same time, right? He like would have been a senior. I would have been a freshman.
Yeah.
Could have even played football together, believe it or not. That's how close we are in age. My point is, I don't think that's just a race issue, dude, because I don't know anybody I know that's white and my age. I shouldn't say anybody, but I would have a hard time finding more than one or two friends my age that are white or black that have a 401k or stocks or any of that shit.
That's where the creativity, and here's the deal.
I mean, most of us don't even own homes, dude.
With this bill addresses 60% of African Americans. There's going to be white people that are in these programs. There's going to be Mexicans in this program. There's going to be Native American brothers.
I'm not saying these things to dismiss your guys' points. I'm saying this shit is happening to a lot of white people too.
Don't disagree.
And not only is it happening to a lot of white people, it's pretty much happening to anyone under the age of 40. Well, that's what I'm really getting at.
And I think where that would
anyone
be resolved,
under 40 with a wealth gap of like 30K. Because even at 30K, you're still fucking broke.
Finding that creativity, finding that will to make that cat want to get up and go to work every day, every week, every month, every year, it has to be a good salary. There has to be a 401k and some type of profit sharing. That's what 401k is to a degree. So, yeah, those are all the components that you want to be able to create. But whatever blossoms and grows here can grow well beyond our community and all across the community. Things that work well. And, I think a lot of the have and the have-nots is the profit margins. CEOs are making so much money, and the frontline people, the amount of money that cat who owns Amazon makes. I mean, how can he not take half his salary and spread it back through everyone who works for him? It's just not that has to, you have to want to do that. You can't mandate somebody to do that. But
he does pay $15 minimum wage.
He does, but still, you want to know where that 401k, that annual trip to Mexico, that other stuff, that's where that would come from, and it doesn't come because CEOs are making a ridiculous amount of money, and even I know a lot of our corporations are all stock, and stock goes up and down. So good business choices have to be made to keep the stock high. Well, stock can still be high, but you can still take care of your employees to a better than we do today. Looking forward, and we wouldn't have such a wealth gap between the haves and the have-not, and that's everybody. That's not just talking about the African American community. That's across the American community. As many of our issues are, they're just more compounded and concentrated in areas that need attention, need to be fixed, and can be fixed, and ought be fixed. And
yeah, that's a fucked up scenario because I've been in those jobs where it's like you're working your ass off, you're making $12, $14, $15 an hour, but those are dead end career jobs. Like, you shouldn't be trying to build wealth
or a family,
working at it.
raise a
Yeah,
family
you just
on it.
shouldn't be like.
No, that's where
and
education
I saw that
comes in,
right,
and getting a good education,
and not even just street smarts education, just being streetwise, like realizing like this is a dead end road. Like this you shouldn't be working in an Amazon warehouse saying like, I'm going to work here for 35 years and retire with pride. Like, no, you're not. You're not a plumber. You're not a tradesman. Like, there's other really fucking good paying jobs out there. And I don't think people understand that those jobs even exist and they're easy to get. Like, you can go to trade school without a lot of money.
Right.
You can go to community college without a lot of money.
AC people
like,
make good money.
Fuck yeah, dude. And there's like, even being unionized as a window washer, you can make $30 to $60 an hour. Like, you don't even need a college education for that. You just got to go to that stupid little window washing school and boom.
Yeah.
And then go sign up with a union.
Yep.
Like it's really not actually that difficult to do out there. So my question is, if you come up with a brilliant idea and you put in 40 to 60 hours a week for 5 to 10 years, and you're the one that invests all your money into the infrastructure to get this thing up and running, how much of that does everyone else deserve? You're the one that had to mortgage your house and take the loan out. You're the one that had to take the risk on yourself. And you're the one that had to put your family through, eating fucking, like, I've seen these guys start businesses and I've been to their houses. They don't have TVs. They don't have a phone. They've got one cell phone for that dude to do business deals on. They don't have cable. They don't have nothing. Their kids they have a nice house, but their kids live very simple, frugal lives. Like, they're all about this business. And the sacrifice, like, I got people that want to do podcasts, right? They're like, hey, would you help me do a podcast? Sure. And this isn't just a rant. Like, I'm touching on a couple themes to bring this whole conversation into many different layers of things that are going on right now. I'm like, sure, absolutely. They're not doing any of the things they need to do. Like, I talked to them. I told them, okay, here's what you got to do, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now do this. And nothing. Everything else is a higher priority. And I can empathize and sympathize with that, because when I first tried to get down here and start this back in March, it was so hard for me to stay disciplined and get down here and get shit done and not be like, oh, well, I got to do this today. I got to do that today. The discipline and the prioritization and deciding, no, this is what's getting done because I want to do this, whether it's a hobby or it's a career or it's changing your life.
Yep.
That has to start there. So I can't help these other people make it happen. I can teach them, I can give them all the tools, but when they continuously prioritize other shit, they're not going to do it. So my point is that's what business owners do on fucking steroids, dude. Like, I've watched these guys work 70 hours a week and sacrifice and everything. Everyone else is like, hey, we're going to the bar tonight. What, you want to come with? Nope. Not only can I not spend any money, but I got work to do here.
Right.
And they do that for 20 years and they build up a multi-million-dollar corporation, and then everybody else deserves equal pay. Come on. I can't subscribe
first of all,
to that.
It depends on the business. Okay. I'm looking into satellite solar panels for electricity. You know what I mean? And I've been asked to head up a sales division for a company. Well, before I get started, I want to really assess our commission structure for our salespeople. And I the goal, and it's a tall goal, but it's one that we should all work hard to get, is that they get that commission, but they get a quarterly bonus and then an annual bonus. Now, if you have to take that commission and you cut it down a little bit each one to make it last, so that you're getting these areas of income down the road, but it's the same commission.
I mean, I understand.
There's ways to do that. But then is Amazon as cheap? Do we get free shipping? Like, does the cost go up? Or are you saying the only way this happens is we have to force Jeff Bezos to take a cut? No, you don't force anybody to do anything. You know what I mean?
Because that's straight up communism.
You know how many companies just throw their employees, they take $100 million and spread it out throughout the company. That happens in American companies all across the country. It happens all the time.
But no one's forcing anybody to go work for Amazon.
And no one's telling them they have to do that. It's a simple it has to be voluntary.
Like, I don't go work for Amazon for $15 an hour. That doesn't seem worth it. The reports I've read about how hard they work their people for $15 an hour, unless I earn like, what is an Amazon share right now worth, like $3,200 or something? So unless I earn like an automatic 5 shares of the company, regardless of where they're at, every year, I'm not into it. Because even then, I'm still depending on those shares splitting multiple times in order for me, like what Microsoft did way back in the day. And that was still even a choice. He's like, I can either pay you this bonus, which was like nothing, $1,000, $100, $500, or I can offer you a bunch of worthless shares in our company.
Right.
And the people that took the shares became millionaires because eventually the company blew up.
Right.
Sure. I mean, I hear you. Tesla takes care of his people.
Yep. And that's all.
Elon Musk
Lead
takes
by
care of his
example.
people over
Lead
at
by
Tesla.
Example, and the more people that do it,
But then don't go work for Amazon. Stop shopping at Amazon. That's what I'm really getting at. Like all you people complaining that fucking Amazon ain't paying their people enough. I bet you got an Amazon Prime account though, don't you? I bet you enjoy that free shipping though, don't you? Maybe not you, but the proverbial you. You know what I'm saying though?
Yeah.
It's like I bet you're enjoying the luxuries of all of that Amazon life. So like, be very careful, not with you, but where we're condemning people going, you're this, you're that. It's like, are you using that guy's product? Are you an Amazon subscriber? You getting that free shipping? Because if you really want to show Jeff Bezos, you hit guys like that in the pocketbook. You're not going to chat them up. You're not going to lay a guillotine outside their front door and scare them. No, literally cancel your fucking Amazon membership. That's the only way to do it.
Right.
Hit them in the pocketbook.
Yep.
If you really care that much, do that. Now, my thing is, until recently, I've had zero issues with him. Is what I have an issue with is he's allowing unregulated products to be sold from China on Amazon to American customers. I have an issue with that. But until then, that dude was doing everything right here in America. He was making America a lot of money. You know what I mean? It was a huge boost for our economy. Mm-hmm. He revolutionized the world. He standardized the idea of like, fuck you. I ain't paying you some ridiculous amount to ship this product. Like, it does not cost $70 to ship this thing because of its dimensions. I'll just buy it on Amazon for free. And all of a sudden it's fine. We'll pay for shipping. Like, the world is better to live in as a consumer because of Amazon. So I don't know, man. I have a real hard time condemning these people that are geniuses and they make because they used to say the same shit.
I'm just saying that people could lead by example.
But people are.
Yeah.
And people used to say the same shit about Bill Gates, and then he donated all of his money.
Yeah.
Like,
can't take it with you.
Let him build up as much as he can, though. The more wealth he builds up, the more he can give away.
True.
So you never know what he plans on doing at the end of the day.
There's equilibrium in there somehow.
My fear is he wants to live forever and privatize space. Like I fear he's like trying to like not die ever, and then be the only one who can deliver you products to the moon or Mars.
Got to go up a little bit. You know what? Just 12 feet above everybody
on Mars. Space. On Mars, you'll get free 2-week
that's
shipping.
The first space you want to figure out. The George Jetson space.
We can make it from here to Mars in 2 weeks. Free 2-week shipping on Amazon.com. That's gonna be wild, dude. Someday you'll buy shit on Amazon and it'll come from Mars.
I don't think I'll be here. I might be here, but I do hope
about 30-40 years probably.
Yeah, I got a good 20 in me, maybe 10.
You
I
think?
want to bust ass for another 10 years. 10 years, and
you
then,
can just pull that back
and
to
then
me.
Retire.
You don't have to keep leaning forward
again. That's all right. I told you I took a spill on the ice. Right?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
A partial spill. You know,
hero.
You catch yourself on that ice, and you don't really fall, but man, it's stiff from head to toe.
Yeah.
I should have just gone and fell. Probably I'd only have one hurt area of my body then.
Let's talk about that real quick here, because it's 3:23, so we'll try to wrap this up around 4. Because we got another one. We're doing another live one for anyone that's watching. I got another
Johnny
one.
Socks. All you punk rockers.
He said,
stay tuned.
My dad did. Oh, Anwar's calling right now. Hold on. He knows we're doing a podcast
Tell
too.
him what's up?
He knows he's coming
What's
on.
up?
What's up, Anwar? Anwar, what's up? Why are you not talking?
You got your volume up?
Oh, my volume's up. He's on speaker too. What's up, Anwar? I bet his headset's not hooked up right, or he butt dialed me. He said, read the entire statement. My dad did. Oh, he must be talking about the 401k thing. My dad did. My dad didn't. My mom did. Nor was it talked about. Creating programs where the schools have failed. Yeah, I mean, I like this idea because they don't teach anything in schools. They don't teach you how to balance a checkbook. They don't teach you anything like that
That's
shit
what
anymore.
Thanksgiving's for. You know, I found growing up the way I grew up is a lot of that money stuff that's real important is taught at Thanksgiving time and through the family.
Really?
Know? Yeah. Yeah. You know,
that makes sense. All right, gather around, children. We're going to make you understand why we're thankful to have jobs.
That's right.
All right, here's how money works.
Yeah, and they hire the family and extend, oh, that's my brother-in-law. I got to have him on the payroll. You know, you got a lot of that out there.
Yeah, nepotism.
Yeah. So we haven't talked any politics. What's going on? People still mourning?
I don't know. I think it's hilarious how the two parties have completely flipped in how they're acting. Like the Democrats were acting like such babies when they lost to Trump, talking about impeachment. He won fair and square. There was no fraud disputes, none of that bullshit. He won fair and square, and they wouldn't let it go. And they were acting like babies. For 4 years, they wouldn't let it go. And now that they won, and I don't believe the fraud is legit, but there's fraud disputes, right? They're not just going, this is bullshit, we hate you, we're going to impeach you, which is basically the only thing they had on Trump. Is like, how are you going to let this guy in office? We have to impeach him. Right. Like, really? But my point is the Republicans mocked them for 4 years for being whiny crab, and they've completely flipped. Now the Republicans are whiny crybabies, and the Democrats have the balls and audacity to try to mock them and be like, "Get over it, you lost." It's like, you fucks.
Well,
oh my God, you guys! It's to me, it's a circus. It's WWE.
They're doing the same thing to each other.
Exactly. It's so funny, dude.
I mean, and the 306 electoral votes. I mean, everything is the same.
It's so funny
except
to
for
me,
Georgia.
Dude.
You know, I don't think Georgia's race is going to be closer than people think because, you know, there were a lot of people who just didn't want to see the president reelected, but the president's not on the ballot in January in Georgia, so it's going to be a whole different ball game down there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens down there. That's traditionally a red state, has been. And you know, states like Arizona and Wisconsin that went red last time, went blue this time. So
yeah, and the Democrats got lucky. They got really lucky with the campaign they chose to run. And Trump made every wrong decision about how he ran his campaign in 2020. He basically ran a very similar campaign to what Hillary ran in 2016, right, which is how you lose,
right?
Which is, I'm not him, you know, blah blah. Right. Look at me, look what I've done. It's like, no. Like, explain to us what you're going to do. No, it's like the NFL. What have you done for me lately? And tell me what you're gonna do, because we don't care what you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, especially with flawed candidates. You know what I mean? Like, Obama didn't have that.
Or to fund the police policies.
Obama had
Those weren't helpful.
Obama had one flaw as a candidate. He was young. He was new. He had no experience. And he was so fucking smart because he did exactly what I would have done. Weaponize that. He said, that's the point. I'm an outsider. Hope you can believe in. The whole fucking thing was centered around the idea of, yeah, I have no experience, and you want this because you're sick of the Bushes and the Clintons. He attacked Hillary so viciously in 2008 when they were running. Oh my God, dude, the bombs he dropped on stage against Hillary. He tore her apart.
Yeah,
talking about the oligarchy and her and Bush and how we've had the same shit I had been saying, which is we've had basically two families running our country for 30 years at that point. And he kicked her ass, and he weaponized his weaknesses. Hillary turned around in 2016, ran the same fucking campaign, It's me. Look at me. And it's like, you weren't even pro-gay marriage until 2013. Don't talk about being progressive. Like, even Trump is on record as early as like 2003 being like, yeah, gays should be able to get married. Who cares? I know a lot of gay people who are gay.
Right.
Because Trump was a Democrat for a long time.
He was.
People don't know that either, or they know it but refuse to ignore it. And then Trump just turned around and did the exact same thing in 2020.
Right.
And he made a lot of bigoted moves. Like, I get it, he may not actually be a bigot, but the people who run the Republican Party to get that conservative, deep religious vote from the far right, they do some real bigoted shit. Like, that abortion shit was fucked up.
Well, you know, that's people will tell you the reason why they're all gun ho over abortion.
Do you know how they did the Supreme Court overhaul? How the abortion thing in Alabama, do you know how they pulled that off?
To make it illegal to have abortions in Alabama, despite the federal law.
Yeah.
Just the numbers.
No, it was logistics. So it was communication logistics in the wording. So Roe v. Wade was based on, when you go to the doctor and have an abortion, you have a right to privacy between you and your doctor. Therefore, the government has no right to know you had an abortion, right? So they never legalized abortion. But if you went and had an abortion at the doctor, the government's not allowed to know that. It's a privacy issue. Big right-wing first, fucking, it's actually, I think, the Fourth Amendment. But yeah, regardless, here's the point. The Supreme Court ruled, no, you have to report that to the federal government. This is some Nazi-level shit. Like, now the government has the right to know what happens between you and your doctor. That is no longer private.
Are you saying that's part of the new Alabama law?
Yep.
Or is that's just in Alabama?
That's how they overruled the court. Yep. That's how, because they didn't overturn Roe v. Wade. They just decided, like, no. Well, technically they did in that state or whatever. So that is some fucked up shit, because you're saying you want to protect babies, but you're violating constitutional rights in order to do so. That's tyranny. Right. Like, no matter how you cut it, no matter how you try to sell it to me, that shit's tyranny. And then I know a few people that say, like, well, they should make it harder. So, like, at least you got to go out of state or do something crazy so you have a long time to think about it. And it's like, yeah, but you know what they did is they passed in that law that if you go out of state to have abortion and then come back into the state, they can try you for murder. So it's not about protecting babies.
It's not.
It's about government tyranny and control and invasions on our fucking constitutional rights.
It's a numbers game too. You know, I tell you, I like Donald Trump. I used to watch The Apprentice all the time. When I was in Indianapolis, when Mike Tyson got his tit in the ringer in Indy, Trump was there supporting him. But I lost it with Trump when he said he didn't know who David Duke was. The minute he said he didn't know David who, I knew he was full of shit on that front, 100%. And he grew in that arena tenfold, and as politicians do,
he lost me back in The Apprentice days,
to preserve, and that's what abortion all is around. It's a numbers game. They're trying to stop white women from having white babies aborted. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
They say that, but I don't think they really care. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
I think
they
that's
do.
the prime directive, and they'll do anything to stop that from happening. It comes from the Catholic Church too.
Here's what my question is name one time prohibition has stopped anyone from doing anything.
Yeah. Well,
when have you prohibited a damn thing in this country and people have been like, okay, I guess we won't do it anymore?
Wasn't weed, wasn't alcohol. Yeah.
Wasn't abortions. We've already been down this path.
Yeah. True.
You know what I mean? Like, this is one of the reasons we did it, is because it was like, holy shit, you guys, this is happening whether we let it happen or not. And what's really happening is we have a bunch of back alley doctors with coat hangers giving fucking chicks abortions, and we got dead women and babies, and we've got serial killers essentially running around.
Right.
So let them go to a fucking doctor and get it done right. So we don't have this and that's all they're doing. By creating an illegal abortion, you've literally created a black market,
right?
A black market of death,
right?
Quite literally,
and that's what would
for profit, by the way.
Right.
Fuck you guys. God,
you
they're
know,
just so
the
stupid.
bottom line is that, you know, it's hard for a man to tell a woman what to do with her body. You know, at the
I
end
don't
of the
think we
day.
should be telling anybody what they can do with their body.
That's
And that goes to the drinking and the smoking weed and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Like, I think we
That's
need to
up to-
legalize that stuff because that's up to you.
And control it, keep it safe. Prostitution too. You know.
Well, in other countries have shown us if you legalize, and I've never done heroin. I know this sounds sketchy, but believe it or not, if you legalize heroin, every country who's done it has shown their heroin addiction rates drop dramatically because an addict is no longer forced to hide in the shadows and do it shunned. They can just go to a clinic and get it. And so it starts to eliminate all the peripheral lifestyle things that go around the use of the heroin, and they self-wean off. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I'm not going to pull any studies up because 2 reasons: I don't have the thing set up on my computer right now, and 2, it's kind of boring. But feel free to look that shit up. Every country that's legalized these kind of drugs, their problems with them have gone down to almost nothing.
I think we could have done a better job blowing up them poppy fields in Afghanistan too. You know, it seems like we let that Taliban grow. You know,
they were preventing the growth. They came back when we kicked the Taliban out. The poppy seed in the heroin fields came back when the American military showed up.
Right.
Started in the 80s, and then when the Taliban took over, they got rid of them.
They got rid of it.
Yep. And then when we came back, we started growing them again.
Yeah.
And our soldiers are out there guarding those fields.
That's crazy. And that heroin's coming into all across our country.
Yep.
Particularly in the rural areas.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's stupid.
It's weird how, like, you've got crack and meth in the inner cities. You've got heroin and oxy in all the suburbs. Like, all the communities have major drug problems now.
Right.
Just pick your poison.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where you live.
Yeah.
What's your favorite drug?
And then you need a pandemic to come on in for 10 months.
Right? No jobs. All those people with no money and all those addictions.
Yeah.
And you want to know why there's a drastic rise in crime? Well, that's why. Let people go back to work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who were functioning addicts. They had decent jobs,
right?
And they siphoned off a little bit of money for their beer, for their booze, for their
what have you,
coke, for their heroin, for their meth, whatever. And then you suddenly take away their income. That addiction still has to be fed. He's calling back.
Yeah.
Let's see if it works this time. What's up, dude? Yo.
What type of delay am I on right now?
What's that?
I said, what type of delay am I on right now?
Like 15 seconds ish.
That's it. Okay. You said I dial. I'm like, yeah. No. I think when I became a manager, it was probably like 5 or 6 years down the line. No, probably a decade, right? And I remember talking to all the managers. Michelle, Randy, all of them, and they were all saying the same thing. They were like, "You didn't sign up for a 401k plan when you got here." And I'm like, what?
They didn't tell you about it.
And they were like, and I'm like, okay. And what they said was, Krista told me that I had to, right? So somewhere in Krista's path, and it goes further than black and white. And I mean, I just understand when you think about just the amount of the lack of education, right? From when I say it's all generational, right? If I had to come from project housing, do you think my parents were worried about a 401k plan? No, that's why they're still working now, right? But through education, through culture, and you guys were talking about culture earlier, and I frown upon that because culture is a breathing, living element that's working right now.
Yep.
Like, culture isn't something like, okay, think about we're all Americans. So what does that mean? It means when I wake up in the morning time, you know what I have? Whatever I want. You know what my Asian friends have typically? Bowls of rice, because they are still stuck in the culture that they brought to America. But America's about integrating that culture.
Good analogy.
A part of this whole thing, right? So I don't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to have a bowl. No, we don't do that. Instead, if I want to have some scrambled eggs with chili, if I want to have a taco, our food is so representative of what we are from a cultural standpoint. And I think more of us need to identify with what it means to be American and less about black and white. As we talked about before, I did the Ancestry.com thing. And what does it even mean? We're still following the rhetoric of some nonsensical slave propaganda that claimed that if I'm X% black, I'm black. Well, who made you the verdict to that? You know what I am? I'm a person who...
I'm doing my podcast.
Hold on, was it?
Somebody's trying to call him right now.
So my point is, now when you get back into understanding the effects of the welfare state, right? If people are on welfare, you know, and they don't graduate from welfare, which is what the system was originally designed to do, they're not asking the questions about retirement or 401k. They haven't looked that far beyond the future or into the future. So part of the American culture is the diversity, not only of people, but of information, right? And it's a living, breathing organism that it can't really be defined as a race anymore. It's antiquated to look at it from that standpoint and say it's a race. Because how do you speak? You speak based on your environment. It's like saying, let me ask you this question. At what point in your life does a person say, oh, he's trying to talk a certain way? What was the age, 11 through 18? Is that the age where, like, what does that mean exactly? Can someone ever choose to better themselves? Can I go to another country and learn their language? Well, what makes it any different? Am I being phony or fake? No, I'm not. I'm not. Instead, it's just the understanding of what American culture is. And because of the diversity we have in food, we have the same diversity in information. We have the same diversity in understanding. So the issue right now is we have a lack of pride, right? Dignity in the African-American culture. But that's changed over the years, right? It's not the same as it used to be. But as a result of that, what does it really mean to be black in America? That's a tough statement. It depends on where you are, because each state, each county has a different culture. Go down to Louisiana and ask them what it means to be black. Can we all agree that there's some undertone to some extent of racism, if you want to call it that? Sure, there are undertones of it, but it's different in each climate. It's not to say it doesn't exist. Understanding from a cultural standpoint, like a good example is Emmett Till. Emmett Till understood what racism was. He grew up in the 50s, right? Was murdered sometime in the 60s. So he was 13, right? Well, what he understood racism to be in, say, Chicago wasn't the same as it was down south, but it still existed, right? And a lot of people argue that had he known the difference and how to understand, maybe he'd be alive still. But the difference is not so much as, because you talked a lot of radical blacks and you use the word racism and they're, especially if you're white, dude, what do you mean? You don't know anything? No, it's a bunch of nonsense.
Well, Chicago had the Harold Washington era for a long time. So, you know, they had their community was engulfed and had all that information and participated in committees and so it was a different, you know, but the state
that's my
itself,
point, right? Is it was different.
But the state itself still has more murders on weekends, you know, than most states. So there's pockets and there's good and there's bad in different areas, but I would just submit that each generation needs to take a whack at it and to make it better for everybody for the next generation. And I would submit
Can I ask you this?
Yep. As soon as I finish this last point.
When we go to Chicago, right? Chicago, if African American people are 12.7, 13% of the population allegedly. I don't know how they come up with that stat, but we'll take it, right? So what percentage of the African American race lives in Chicago? So when you think about it from a standpoint of murder per capita, right? When you look at that number, you understand how small it is, but the problem is they don't show you about the places that thrive, the places that are great communities. Instead, they create this stigma that we talk about Chicago, not a state, but a city. And in that city, are there murders? Are there crimes? Like one of the craziest things to look at in America that I was alarmed by, look at the amount of murders that take place in America each year. And whatever you were thinking, I guarantee you will be underwhelmed. You'll be like, that's it? I was expecting more than that.
St. Paul is one murder away from the 1992 record. What city do you live in?
I live in Otsego right now.
Where?
I'm out in the burbs, man.
Oh, the suburbs. Well, you know, the city of St. Paul, they're at like 32 murders. 33. They're one away from the record of 1992.
So you're 33, what, a week, a day, a year?
For
what
the
are we
year.
looking at?
For the year.
Okay, so when you think about, but my point is, to anybody listening, when you think about 32 or 33 deaths, if you don't understand, that number is still kind of underwhelming, right? I mean, when people talk about murder, right, and they talk about how it's a problem, obviously, speaking from a person who didn't lose anybody to murder, right, easy for me to say. But when you look at that statistic and ask yourself, 32 deaths, most people were expecting more. Most people were probably expecting you to say a week, a month, but we're talking about 32. So that's, what is that? That's about 2 deaths, 1.8 deaths a month due to murder in a city. Now, is that low? Is it high? I don't know. I've never had to ask myself that question.
Well, the goal is to always get things lower on that front.
I agree.
And the jobs, working jobs, you want them to be higher. I mean, that's what public policy does. Policy creates outcomes. And they can create good outcomes or they can create bad outcomes. Yeah. And our bill simply across the board
earlier,
creates better again, outcomes.
They can create what?
Outcomes, better outcomes, statistical outcomes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think that, you know, you make a great point about the programs. Programs are key because the programs are the key to enlightenment. And that's what people are lacking. So somewhere in your process, somewhere in your journey, you ran into someone, a surgeon, I think you said, or doctor, who told you, put this idea into your head.
Yeah.
And Lord knows, me and Jared got into a great conversation about greatness, how we talk about Michael Jordan and LeBron and we put them in eras, but what we don't talk about is the psyche, the psychological elements that made them great. You take away one ripple effect and maybe Michael Jordan isn't Michael Jordan. That's why it's so hard. You take away, you know, Michael driven off failure, LeBron had to live up to the hype, motivated by 2 different things, right? So I'm saying this because when you start to undo certain elements, it changes the whole dynamic of an argument. But the point I'm making is when you look at somebody like these stats you bring up about, I'd have to say I'd agree. I agree with you because when you think about, for one, how many African-American people are in Minnesota, when you get outside the Twin Cities, I mean, there's that number. So from a number standpoint, I can agree, but I can also agree with Jared because when we go out to Brand, Minnesota, what do you see out there? You don't see a ton of diversity. You start heading to southern Minnesota, you don't see it. We got this one melting pot in the Twin Cities. And aside from that, the outskirts of Minnesota, you don't see a ton of diversity. So those numbers will be skewed. So both will be right to some extent.
Maybe Duluth.
Actually,
yeah, but look what we got to do. We're talking about how many cities in Minneapolis, Minnesota? And of those, only a few of them, when you really put it into perspective, are diverse in general. Well, so both statistics, and that's the problem with numbers. But what we do know from the eye test is, again, being African-American, I didn't hear a ton of 401k talk. So I had to run into somebody who basically gave me this understanding, just like that doctor who submitted an idea. Okay, and you got to run with that idea and you got to grow with it and you got to spread it.
Yeah, it was
My question for you is, how do you, what does the money do exactly? I've always wondered that.
With a 401k?
No. When you talk about putting money, like money will create programs.
Right,
is that correct?
Right. Well, you know, government collects taxpayer money and they disperse taxpayer money, and they go through their committees to determine where that money should go, and then they ultimately get on bills, and then ultimately they go to wherever the majority determine them to go. And my point is that these hyper segregated areas that were segregated are not as segregated today, but from a poverty perspective are hyper with respect to any other parts of the state of Minnesota. They require attention and they're not getting the attention. And when they do get the attention, it's not in the right place, it's not at the right amount, and it's not for the right duration. So the Injustice Correction Engagement Authority takes a look at these issues from a categorical perspective, so that health professionals are dealing in health related issues. Educators are dealing with education related issues, and entrepreneurs are dealing with the economic development, job creation, home ownership, and then public safety. There's more money for law enforcement and diversion programs for youth. So, and this is done consistently for every 2 years for the next 45 years. So it's a pivot from the way we do things and the way we have done things to create better outcomes in these communities across America. Because at the end of the day, you get a stronger African-American community, you take that 40% and you knock that down to 20%, will make a big difference in society, because that 20% is now tax-paying citizens working and striving and providing for their families. That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's where people should want to get to. And this bill will get us there.
Yeah, and each generation, as you said earlier, each generation takes a stab at it.
That's
each generation looks at the understanding of a lot of people can't understand, but you said you were in the radio, right, at one point?
Yep.
Okay. Remember how if you would have listened to, like, let's say these kids who got drafted in the NFL, NBA, go back to how they sounded, say, back in 1992, right? Listen to them now. That's the difference. Is their exposure to diversity
right?
Is inevitable.
Larry Fitzgerald.
They don't
Let's just
even
look at
sound
Larry
the
for
same.
let's use Larry as an example. How outstanding is he?
Who?
Larry Fitzgerald, wide receiver,
yeah, I
Arizona
grew up with him,
Cardinals,
yeah. Went to Sebastian
Minneapolis,
South with him.
Born and raised
in Minnesota.
Born and raised in Minnesota.
You know, so no,
Yeah, but
I'm underlining your point that
Yeah.
are we getting better? Yes, we are. Are we getting to a closer to that one America? Yes, we are. I believe this bill will get us all the way there.
But it's got to come with it's got to come with people like yourself, even going to these places, right? And literally, see, like a good example is I'm big into fitness. A lot of my friends got inspired to work out because they saw me probably after a couple of years. They're like, "What are you doing?" What they saw it in the flesh. They saw the reality of it, right? What inspired Mike Tyson to box? He saw Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali came to one of these institutions for troubled youth. And who was there? Mike Tyson was there.
Right.
And what did he see? He saw it in the flesh. He said, I can do this.
Right.
And I think that it's important when you have that, this outlet, this sort of understanding, this sort of, I don't even want to say esoteric, just you have information that now realize, like me and Jerry get these conversations about dialect. Well, when people say talking this way, talking that way, it's called language. And it's a natural progression that just takes place when you throw a bunch of people into a group, they form a language. And being able to go to Southside, see, it's like when you got integrated with the culture, all you did was understand how to communicate, how to understand, how to sympathize, how to say, we're all going through the same thing. We just express it differently, but if we can understand it, then we understand we're going through the exact same thing. So being able to go to Southside, being like, for me, I've been a basketball coach for almost 20 years, and I wanted to really focus on city kids, right? And be the example for them, but teach them about these same things we're talking about. And by doing that, I feel that's really the biggest key is, because you can have these programs, but as you talked about before, what happens to these government programs? They begin to get convoluted, and before you know it, these programs are not receiving the funds that should be allocated. And if we rely on the government to fix all our problems, we'll be waiting for the rest of our lives. But if we rely on
Reverend
ourselves,
McAfee will tell you that right out. And there are many people who believe that. Prince too. I believe that too. But at the end of the day, we still are men. We still live under a political process that is in play that can affect people's lives. And as much as I agree with Prince and his spiritual perspective, and it's not, at the end of the day, it can and it should be done on man's level as well. Man just has to not be so selfish and take care of his own. He needs to take care of other
agreed,
people.
100%. And the way to do that is, you talked about government. Let me ask you this question. Ask the average kid, the average person, what's the president's job? Yeah, I want to hear executive. I don't want to hear, no, I want you, somebody tell me something. Somebody tell me about a circuit court. Somebody talk about the executive branch, talk about the FDA, talk about what the president really does. And the issue right now is, I think schools blatantly disregard what really could be taken advantage of. And so what you talk about is understanding how the government works to be able to use it to our advantage. How many programs are out there for people who are, say, disenfranchised? Like, okay, a good example, I'm a military vet. You know what I found out?
Thanks for your service.
No problem. But they would do it all over again, do the exact same thing. You know what I found out? This whole time I could have been receiving VA benefits. I could have been going to the VA for free. No one told me. No one told me, hey, by the way, and I say this because that recruiter told me about and hey, thank God I got this house because of the military. But he didn't say, by the way, when you're out of the military, because you're a military vet for the rest of your life, benefits. Just go to the VA.
Right.
Go to the VA.
Right. There's a lot of benefits.
He never said that.
Right.
No one told me that.
That says that's the information is the key to life. You know, those who have it make the rules. Those who have it benefit. Those who don't have it, that's why people fought so hard. And I brought up earlier about 100 Years a Slave that the Polad brother produced. That movie where the slave from the North. If you recall how many times when they were 100 lashes if you were taught to read. If there was even an attempt of you trying to learn how to read, it was 100 lashes.
Or murder.
And how many times that came up in that movie and the way it came up. That's real, man. And it's that information and that education across all specters is the key to life. And that those people who have it. Those who don't have it will be in a different place. And at the end of the day, all that and today with the computers and telephones, all information is for everybody now.
It's everybody, yeah. And when you get into the for-profit prison system and talk about how that works, how it has a lot more to do with disenfranchised people in poverty.
That's where
the real race killer.
Right. That's where this movement goes, is that criminal industrial complex, and to start chipping away at that financially and redirecting those resources back into the community to make sure that we're not sustaining people's jobs and livelihoods as jailers, and
we're killing it in the government. Like, what is the government, right? Everyone loves to, how people say this. Well, realize the government now has become infiltrated by corporations, and these corporations are even passing laws. So this isn't hyperbole. This isn't exaggerated claims. This is real. So the issue is, when you understand the government, you understand the game. So growing up in both cultures and many cultures, right, I saw my dad, a hustler. He gave me the hustle to life, and I saw it everywhere once he made me aware. It's going on right now, and all you have to do is keep that information from people. But to understand, what's going on in our world would be to give us the information as to how to stop it. Like, think about this. When we get into 100 Years a Slave, why was it so important for them not to read? Because that was the key to information. Just understand at that point in their lives.
Right.
Like, they had no idea that anything else existed.
Right. And the Minneapolis public schools, I mediated the NAACP's lawsuit against the state of Minnesota, the legislature. It was a two-year mediation because, it was clearly the goal to get the resources from the state and divert it to gifted and talented students, monies that were supposed to go to, they're called compensatory dollars. We didn't talk about when I ran for office in 96, but I ran as a Republican in 1996. And that was my issue at the legislature. And that year, compensatory dollars didn't go to the districts. They went directly to the school buildings.
To the schools, yeah.
So that year, a school that was getting $250,000 of compensatory dollars for the last 3 years, all of a sudden got a $600,000 check, which is what they were supposed to be getting. And then there's gifted and talented schools in Southwest that were getting, $630,000, all of a sudden got $200,000. So what did the school board do? Well, then they took that out of their janitorial and other budgets. So ultimately,
other places.
Yep. Ultimately, they still won. But those are the political games that have been played that happen all the time, where simple equality is just not met. And this bill fixes that. In an
insidious way, like the No Child Left Behind.
Just a slogan.
It's supposed to, but really, when you know,
it's a good idea
based on the road you're going down.
Right.
What I learned from living out here in Otsego is you talk to all different types of people, and to your credit, to your point, that had nothing to do with the graduation rate. It had everything to do with having a child vested, right? In order to receive X amount of dollars of that, what do you call it, that state tax, or what do you call it, the property tax that us pay to the bureaucrats, the kid has to have X amount. So it isn't really about quality. It's about the amount of days they're in school. Right? Because,
very important. Very important. I might not have been an A student, but I was at school every day.
Yeah. So, but now it's like, it seems like a great thing, but what they're rewarding is the monetary element of, to what you were saying earlier, is there's just corruption going on. And every so often there's got to be checks and balances.
Right.
Because with corruption comes taking advantage of the corruption.
Right.
And then corruption grows. And before you know it, it's hard to uncorrupt something.
And let me call out Mayor Fry's administration, because he's failed to get back to me. I simply want to sit down with our Minneapolis lobbyist team. The Minneapolis has lobbyists that lobby for Minneapolis issues, but he doesn't see it a priority to hook us up with them, even though this will bring resources back to his city. If he can't control it, they don't support it. And that's our problem on the left.
I didn't mean to cut you off earlier,
no,
but you were going
didn't.
down the road, and I wanted to add to, like, the bigger picture. And see, a lot of people, they get caught up in this whole fact. And as I've said before, it isn't about facts. It's about learning how to make sense of things. And you got to use these senses to do just that, to make sense. And what do we see right now going on? The issue in urban schools is a lot. I mean, I think, for one, the welfare state in the 60s played a huge role in creating this sort of, without a father, because what did every mother, including my mom, had to do, right? She had to say that she didn't know the whereabouts of my father.
Exactly.
And then you put a system in place that says, hey, we're going to lock you up for using drugs, not selling drugs. So if you look at even the stipulations for the ramifications for selling drugs, keys, right? We're less than a person who is using drugs. It's ridiculous to think. So now what we're seeing is, now, though, that and you can thank the Clinton administration and all the two presidents before that to really perpetuate that idea, which is why Democrat Republicans should be a nonsensical topic right now.
The People's Party.
Be about how do we run our country and how do we come together to see a common goal, and that is this information we have right now should give us an understanding that if they can take advantage of it, they will. Redlining was a problem until it got exploited. Gluten was a problem until it got exploited. All it takes is for people to realize, like to Jared's point earlier about this Amazon, same thing. It isn't one person, it's many people to say, look, we see a problem.
Right.
And I think to some extent, when you go back to the welfare state and you follow that trickle down, a lot of us, especially the 80s babies, 70s, your dad was in jail. Dad was in prison, wasn't home because he got thrown in prison for doing something that does not warrant a nonviolent offense. So who's at home? Mom. Mom's okay because she's getting welfare. Right. So, and if you're in the home, it created a stigma that made it so I was the first African-American boy in my family to graduate and buy a home. So somebody had to break the cycle.
Yeah.
But the goal now is, so I had a buddy of mine. When I bought a house, I told him how easy it was. He bought a house. So it's about that information, as you said earlier, and you need programs in place that are going to succeed where the generational ignorance has failed, right? Or to some extent succeeded, because that ignorance is what's encouraged people to just be complacent.
Exactly.
Right. And to Jared's point earlier about his podcast, it was the same thing. It's self versus self. And what I do want to say, and I think we can all agree on this, is there were too many people who fought and gave their lives so I could have a choice.
Amen, brother.
So I could look at myself in the mirror and say, you are messing up.
And I wouldn't want to be in any other country.
No, exactly. But the importance is to look in the mirror and realize the lineage, the people, the history that got us here.
Right.
It isn't about omitting slavery. It's about gaining strength from it. It's about realizing, slavery was but a blip. Go beyond slavery and understand what you were. Most of Europe was covered with African Americans, right? Or excuse me, see, look at that. so-called Tammy, mahogany, or black as they described it. Benjamin Franklin did a consensus in Europe, and what he described as most people had a darker complexion, crazy or Tammy. As it gives you this understanding of what has history really taught us. Is history really teaching us what really went on, or is it just some other version, or as they say, history? But I won't even go down that rabbit hole. My point is if people look at themselves as a derivative of slavery, well, I went and did Ancestry.com, and I'm like 25% white.
Yep.
Right? I'm European.
I'm 50%
so I have to
Hungarian.
own all of that now, right? Yep. I can't use the slave master's mentality and say, oh, because you said that, if X amount of percentage of me is black, then you're black.
Well, and that's always been a
rule.
Well,
this is the only country who lives off that philosophy.
Well, yeah, the New Zealand had something a while back, a long time ago, where you weren't considered human again until you only were 1/8 black. They called them octoroons. This was a real thing. So like back in New Zealand, black people weren't human, and you were only human once you were down to 1/8 black. You were called an octoroon. But my question is like, because reparations keeps coming up,
right.
Like I'm super mixed, so like I want to know how this works. Like, so like, what if you got somebody who's 50% white and 50% black, and they were both a descendant of a slave and a descendant of a slave master? You gonna take money from that person and give it back to themselves? No, you're gonna take money from that person, and then you're gonna give them a tiny amount of what you took from that person. You see what I'm saying?
Well, what are taxes?
That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. You're going to take $200 from everybody in America, and you're going to give it to a select few. But there's a bunch of people that are mixed that are going to be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense.
That's why, that reparation is a tall order, because there is more individuality that goes with it. Our bill is a communal bill. It's community driven. It's from a community perspective, for a community perspective. And it's simply a group of Minnesotans looking at numbers and saying, hey, we could do better here. Let's try this. Can you
say you could summarize the idea of what you're doing as to try to generate more equality of opportunity?
Without a doubt.
Because there's language going around right now where people are trying to effectively create equality of outcome. And that's what people are like, nope, that's not going to work. And they're immediately out. But if we sell the idea that we're just simply trying to create more equality of opportunity, I think that's something that everybody should be on board with.
Right.
And so we used to just simply call them underprivileged youth. That's the term I heard when I was a kid, is underprivileged kids. I was an underprivileged kid. So, and it's because we were below an income bracket. So that's what we're really trying to do, is create more opportunities for underprivileged peoples.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Jared, right? So we talked about being Native American. So, my story, right, is I learned from my great-grandmother before she passed away, my grandmother, that my great-grandfather was half Cherokee Indian, right, and half so-called black, right? And then I learned on my mom's side that my great-grandmother was Cherokee Indian, right? But now understand, if you go to Ancestry.com, good luck trying to find any Native American DNA. Because now, to your point, Jared, right, technically if I have X amount of percentage of unknown or this Native American in me, what percentage do I have to be to get that money? Well, it's not that simple. Right now, in order for me to do it, I got to go through, I got to be a part of a tribe. I have to go through a certain process.
You have to live on the reservation.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
Yep.
I see that messy. I see that as very politically messy.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So it's messy. How do you do that? How do you even fathom that? I don't think you can. I think without spending another hour just on this one topic, I think we can quickly say that just throwing money around isn't going to fix anything. We're trying, everybody can agree with that we want less losers in our society. We want to create more winners. And the best way to do that is give everyone a fucking shot. Like, just give them a shot. That's what, and here's the thing, like, not to compare myself to every single human being out there, but the difference I do see with me and a lot of the people I know is that there's something I've always said from being 12 years old is just give me a chance. Just give me a shot. Yep. Just get my foot in the door. Just get me in the room.
Right.
And I will fucking...
And you got to make it happen.
Right.
You're half that success.
Exactly. So let's just give people
That's what
a
this
shot.
Does. That's what this does. That's what this does. And this would work in Illinois. It'd work
and
in
just to be,
it'll work in
hold on.
That he's talking about.
Hold on, Anwar, hold on. And just to be clear, the reason you're saying this bill is going to do that is because we're going to take less. It's the same idea of telling somebody who lives in Washington, D.C. and say, you're going to decide all the animals that can be hunted and can't be hunted across the entire country. Well, they don't know what animals we have a problem with in Minnesota. They don't know what animals they have a problem with down in Texas. Yeah. They just get some arbitrary ability to do that. And is what you're saying is that's how these funds are distributed here, is at the state level by some fuckboy in Otsego or some fucking stupid whore up in Brainerd, wherever they are. About. Exactly. And
well, there's cronyism. I mean, understand there's quid pro quo. There's so much corruption going on.
Well, and not only that, but the money is already here. Important. But the key is that the money's already here. Is what we're doing is we're delegating the authority at a local level around people that can actually see and identify what's going on.
Well,
so instead of deploying a bunch of battleships to make decisions that take slow plotting turns, we got a bunch of tiny little fucking cruisers that can make quick little decisions and move around real fast. So I like this idea. If anybody gets,
but I want to add to what you're saying, Jared. So, but see, the issue is the idea sounds great in principle. The execution of the idea or this bill is everything, because what do we need? What do we need as people in general, right? We need to understand what options exist, right? You don't know what you don't know, as they always say.
So we need more transparency.
But you need more, not only transparency, but understand something. Like the Bible says, a fool and their money will soon what? Depart.
Right.
So just by giving someone money, they'll make the same foolish decisions.
But you're not giving people money. You're giving a body, a group of educators, a group of health professionals who then in turn give that money out. So they're not
that part. That makes it right. But what I'm saying
is the beauty. That's the the intellect of this and the accountability.
So how do we prevent the same type of corruption we see in the school systems where the money's there, but it ggets eaten up at the admin level,
as he said earlier,
because our budget's already made and our budgets are 10% admin. The only money that goes into admin or pays the stipends to the people who sit on the committees. And the 6 people who run the whole program. Everything else goes right.
So very transparent.
Goes right. Yeah, it's less than 10%.
So what's the name of the bill called?
The Injustice Correction Engagement Authority. Throughout the community, throughout the state of Minnesota. North, South, and Metro.
Where does that money go once it's in the community?
That's going to be up to those committee people in their respective areas.
So if that person on the healthcare side says, "Hey, we need more money going to infant healthcare in Hennepin County. We don't need as much over here in fucking Ramsey County. So we're going to move this money from here to here, and we can do that right now because we have the authority. We don't have to wait until next year's legislation." And then on the education side, they can go, "Hey, this one school within this district is being heavily underfunded for some reason. We're going to make that correction now instead of waiting 2 years from now when the school board would normally vote and decide at a state level."
I want to ask though,
is that correct?
That's correct.
By adding funds, it all comes down, as I said before, to the execution. And I can't say and I can't say that enough, because like I said, what does it mean to more people like us, like people in our society, need to sit down and realize, as I told you before, we're a conversation away from everything, but that conversation always should start and end not with empathy, but with sympathy. You pay property tax right now, even though you don't have kids, Jared, because the kids across the street can go to school. That's all geared on sympathy. right?
Well,
So
and not only that,
understand
but there's
None of that's
there's
going
al-
to change.
there's also
Well,
selfish
I know,
motives
let me
there, though.
make my point, though.
But there's no.
I'm going down the road with this one.
Well, hold on, hold on. Let me jump in here because there's also you're right, and there's also selfish motives there too. Because not only is there sympathy because it's just the right thing to do, but the more educated citizens I have around me, the better my world is.
Okay, yeah. Trust me, I'm not even
and the more
with what you're saying. What I'm saying, Jared, is first understand like you own a home, so you pay this thing called property tax.
Yep.
Right. So
pays
it
for
starts with
schools,
us.
roads,
Where
and
does
cops.
the money go from there? And then once we realize, okay, we follow this path. All right, the money's going to schools, but then, I mean, as he brought earlier, with just a great plethora of knowledge, we see the sophistication of the nonsense that goes on that prevents it from going to said schools.
Yep.
So it all comes down to the execution to the people. And in order to do that, like, okay, so you asked earlier.
That's the federal money that does that. The federal money that comes down gets eaten up. The property taxes go pretty straightforward. They go straight to the county and straight back to the schools.
See a new bill that says, hey, they want to put up some new park. Right. Yay or nay against this park. What park? I ain't seen a park built here in 2 years, but every year I keep seeing my property taxes.
It's at the school.
For a park.
It's at the school. It's at the school.
Yeah.
Okay, right. But my point is, when we get into this thing called sympathy, is the key to not allowing this corruption to take place. So he brought up a comment earlier about what blacks are in Minnesota. Like I said, when you look at it from a population density standpoint in the Twin Cities, you got a bunch of people on the north side, you got a bunch of people on the south side, right, living in subsidized housing, right? And even the narrative you gave about the person who doesn't want to make too much or too less, they're a victim of the same system that is creating this sort of complacency.
Right. We got to incentivize those people to want to take that race and that promotion.
They got to understand first. And the only way they're going to understand is to gain this knowledge, right? All the programs are great if they are motivated and inspired people that understand the power of sympathy. And I keep going back to this. And
you have to explain the power of sympathy, because I don't understand the power of sympathy. This is there's nothing sympathetic about what we're trying to do here, other than the fact that we're
hear me out then.
Yeah, help me out there.
The power of sympathy, right? Is when you break this word down, it is to share and understand one's struggle, right? To truly sympathize with someone is to listen and say, wow, you're right. I feel you. You're right.
Let's do something.
That is the one
about
element when you remove that from what we are as humans, we're no longer humans.
I got you there.
Empathy's a nonsense.
I got you there.
You need people that truly understand. So if you could understand, if each person could tell their story and not be undermined. Yeah, I can tell you what it's like to be black in 1987. I got called nigger every day because I went to an all-white school in Dayton, Minnesota. It was real. I went through that, right? I can tell you that it happened, but I can also tell you that moment didn't define me either. Right. Each day that elapses defines me. But because of that, I can tell you to anybody who thinks it isn't real, sure, it's real. Matter of fact, I can understand it more than the average, because a lot of people didn't have that experience if you went to school in the city school.
And you didn't have to go through that, did you, when you were in school? Because we kind of talked about that. You didn't really experience it directly.
When I did, I addressed it, and then not too many people really, people got to know me, and you just didn't do that. I think fourth grade was my first fight at school, and I won.
Saying this.
Well,
Iowa, is that where it was?
No, it's where'd you say in Minnesota?
I went to Castle Elementary School, Maplewood Junior High, and Tartan High School in Oakdale, East Suburbs.
Oakdale, man, okay, yeah.
Tartan Titan, 82.
Wow.
Chicks and Brew for 82.
Yes. So this was 82, right? So going back to even 87, the other narrative is that racism lasted for first grade. Once it was over, you know what happened? People adjusted.
Right.
It became so few far in between. So there's more to that narrative, and it's the progressive element of the mindset of each person.
Right.
People can change,
and that's the beauty of this. This has nothing to do with me, because I think I grew up a pretty good life. I got my entrepreneurial spirit from my mom. I've started working when I was 14 years old. This is not really for me in my lifetime, but it's for me and what I've seen in my lifetime with respect to where we are as a country and as a state, and how we could just be a little bit better doing something a different way. That creates more Larry Fitzgeralds.
Yeah, and I think the formula is a good idea because again, you're not asking for more money, you're not asking for money to be diverted, you're asking for a separation of authority on how that money and who delegates that money where, and you can do that much faster. I like that
more
idea.
Effectively,
yeah, it makes sense,
and it's easy to do outcome-based analysis on all the committees and all the areas. Which will be done.
Like when that happens, for example, we need to get our fucking roads plowed here over north. Like we never get our shit plowed properly or on time.
Budget. Take a look at MnDOT's budget. That's yeah, I know that because you can tell how much ice gets accumulated on the streets, Well,
and it causes serious problems
with the vehicles.
And then they turn around and they ticket us because we didn't move our car, and it's like, well, it's kind of hard to dig your car out when you don't plow the streets at all.
Not
and
to digress, Jared, but when we talking about where all these funds and whatnot come from,
you ready to wrap this up?
Next street should be here soon, education. Right? It's all about having these types of conversations. It's about people having honest conversations, but that connection, that human element that says connect and understand is always key. Because that's when you come out of any conversation enlightened and saying, okay, you know what? I understand now, but it takes a certain sense of self-honesty. And I think a lot of times when you get into these conversations with anybody, they're still putting up that facade, that face, right? That persona, that not who they are at the core, but who they want you to think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying is, when you go back to even how he was talking about redlining earlier, it isn't about now, it's about the residual effects of that redlining. So because of that, I didn't have any property. And it's not to say that you are not the norm or the exception, right? Or this anomaly. Is to say that this happened to a group of people specifically designed because based on the color of their skin.
Right.
That the property value in places would go down if you brought these people in. So we weren't as entitled to, say, nicer places because of what would happen. Equity goes down when people stop taking care of the property and allegedly. But with that being said,
and now there's heavily
to the average person.
Well, and that was definitely true. But working in the mortgage industry, I can verify there is heavy amounts of regulation to make sure that's not currently going on.
Of that, though.
Well, right.
So you go back to 65 and 66. What does it mean? It means generational wealth, right? That's how people who were born with something leave with a little bit more than something, or people who were born with nothing maybe gain something, right? As you said before, people live in this country, they're born poor but expect to be rich.
Yeah,
right?
that's
we have these gaps in places like redlining. So what does that do?
Well, I think there's a few things going on there. Here's what I think's going on, because it's something I've been kind of pondering on and putting together for a few months, which is one of the reasons I took the phone call, because I was like, well, I've been trying to have this dude on anyways, so fuck it. But I've had this idea for a while now that there's too many people in this country, and this didn't used to be true, and I'm not getting nostalgic on the bit, but there's too many people that in this country are born poor and expect to die rich. Whereas in the past, they would come here born poor or be born here poor, and they would hope that their children or grandchildren would die rich. And so they understood it took generations to do this. And I think one of the reasons for this is because we have so many luxuries everywhere sitting around us at all time that we actually have mistaken them for necessities. And same thing, everybody in this country has so many privileges that we've literally started to mistake them for rights.
Well, we're the 1%.
We have two people in our household. We've got
of the
5
world
cars
that lives life in a certain way. Right? We're that 1%.
Right.
Don't even know it.
America, exactly. Like the poor people in my neighborhood, all of us have more than one vehicle.
Who died of starvation? Anybody say, man, what happened to Jamal? He died. He can get no food. You never had that conversation. That's like oxymoronic, right? We're not worried about starvation, the things that real third world countries have to deal with. Go to the Philippines and see 10 houses.
Yeah, exactly. People are complaining that their phone's outdated. So, their cell phone is outdated.
We use this information, as you're saying, to make sense of everything that's going on.
Exactly.
It doesn't change the fact, right, that what's going on in America, there's so many different elements. For one, what does it really mean to be white? I'll tell you what I've realized about this whole thing called white privilege, right?
Yeah, and then I want to get your thoughts on white privilege,
okay.
too.
So, like, when you think about white privilege, imagine growing up in an environment and you are just on the cusp of, say, working class, middle class. But right in front of you, there's some kid who thinks that they're wealthy because their parents are wealthy, right? They have all these things, all these amenities, all these different things at their disposal. They had the CD player and everybody else had the Walkman, right? I'm going old school, right? They had all these things. And so this person grows up thinking, why not me? Even though they don't understand, even from their standpoint, that you have a pantry. You know what it means to be starving like Marvin? To only have condiments in your fridge? Right? That's starving. That's no food. But when you got a deep freezer and a pantry and you talking about there's no food, that's your interpretation of what you don't have, only compared to what's in your environment. So then these people grow up with this same sort of disdainment because they always felt like they were underprivileged.
Exactly. And then you see the Jeff Bezoses, you see the Kim Kardashians, you see rich people out there, and you think, well, I should have that too, and there's no way they got that without taking from somebody. So the only way that this can be righted is if we take all the rich people and they have to give all their stuff away to all the poor people. And it's like, trust me, we're going to end up right exactly where we were within 20, 30 years because people are either really good at hoarding and making money or they're not. You know what I mean? Like me giving, there's stats to prove this. How many people that were legit poor and legit broke win the lottery and then several years later go bankrupt?
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you, what's your speaker's the guest on the show? I keep saying he.
Sam Cooke.
This is literally my Uncle Sam.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna call him Sam, right?
Sam,
Sam, in your experience, right? Because now I know that you're a vet in this game, and you know your word has a lot of weight. How have you seen? You know, because Jared brings up a point about all this entitlement and whatnot. So it's like from one element there's this sort of entitled person who feels they just should have more because what they have isn't good enough. But then it's tackling this element of, well, there were people who had it bad, who had it worse than you, right? Like I grew up obviously in Minnesota, born in Georgia, grew up in Minnesota. And rather than be envious, I looked at those people and I thought to myself, that's motivating me. I want that. All my white friends had houses.
Yeah, I ask every time I see that, I go, man, how do I do that?
And I said, I want that. You know what I started doing? Asking questions. What I didn't do is show any envy and that because to me that the whole element of white privilege is one of envy. It's someone who feels even though you're not entitled to act this way I am because this is what I saw and this is how it should be and I didn't have that, so why should you? And it's like, no, man, this is on a whole different scale. So you talked about having a good life, but can I just understand, like,
my perspective
you went to all these
on
schools in '82? How diverse was it, and what did you see? What was the differences in?
You were the only black dude up there.
Yeah, here's the deal. I grew up enjoying my white privilege and white supremacy. Yeah, I just said that. I just said that. And let me tell you why and how, okay? First of all, I was an outgoing cat, okay? And I was one of the only black people in my neighborhood. So I got to know the police officers. That's why I wanted to be a cop. I got to know the cops in my neighborhood, and they got to know me.
And you're charismatic, and
I'll never forget the one day I was walking down the street, and a squad car come around the corner, and I walked right down the middle of the street right at him, and I thought it was one of the cops I knew, but no, it wasn't. So it was another cop that ultimately I just got to know. So, one time I took the old man's car out. I was probably 15 years old. And I had me a bottle of blackberry brandy, and clear, you can smell that on your breath. And I'm doing fishtails on Cairo B. Ended up underneath the barbed wire fence, and the first car that comes, a cop car. And I take the bottle and I stick it underneath the car and tell the cop my brother was driving and he ran through the woods. What'd the cop do? Drove me home. Have your old man call me in the morning.
Look,
have your old man call me in the morning.
That's great.
That's white privilege, and I enjoyed it.
Exactly. Hey.
Another
Oh my God.
another
But
story.
see, here's the thing, though.
Another story.
Schultze said it best, though, man. Schultze said it best. That's not even privilege. That's the way it should be. That's just how it's supposed to be, man. Whether it's privilege, white privilege, black privilege, Asian, it's not supposed. That's just the way it's supposed to be.
Another friend of mine, white, got caught with weed in the pipe, and the cop says, "How's your throwing arm? Throw that pipe out in that cornfield as far as you can throw it." He threw it. He made him throw it out there. He threw it out there and then let him go. You know?
Yeah.
That's white privilege.
Okay, but you know what's funny about when I hear you talk about this? What is that cop doing? That cop is saying, "Oh, wait a second, I was 15 once."
Yep.
That's called sympathy. That's my point.
Yep.
Is he understands what this guy's? Well, I'm gonna throw him in jail for this.
That's
right.
Right.
Throw him in jail for this.
That's why
I'm getting.
And here's the difference: is that's suburban and rural life. You come to the cities, it doesn't matter what color you are. You get busted in those situations. At best, if you're lucky and you have a cool cop, he might just bring you home. But 9 times out of 10, dude, I can't tell you how many times I got in trouble in the cities for shit I never would have gotten in trouble for in the fucking suburbs, like including curfew. I didn't even know curfew was an actual thing until I came to the cities, and I didn't know it was a state law. Like there was a law, kids couldn't be out past 9 p.m.
Right.
I had never known this and been out till midnight my entire life. And at 14 years old, I moved to Minneapolis, and I literally get stopped and arrested by a cop. Arrested. And they bring me downtown for truancy. We were 3 blocks from my house. 3 blocks. In city blocks.
Could have just took you home.
Or just followed me home.
Right.
Instead, he took me all the way downtown at like 11, right? And all I was doing was walking home from my buddy's house. Like we were playing video games, lost track of time.
This is one of those
woke my mom up. Dude, it set off this chain reaction of drama and paperwork and court hearings.
Right.
Like I got so lucky because I got a lucky judge who asked me, so what happened here? I want to hear what you said. And I was like, dude, I lost track of time. It's Friday night. I was hanging out with my buddies. We were done playing video games. I was walking from this address to this address. And he verifies, he goes, this makes sense. I'm not going to ruin your life over this. I got lucky that night. But that guy, I watched that guy literally turn around. The next kid was also white. Or I'm sorry, the kid before me was also white. And I watched him do the exact opposite with that kid, because that kid had gotten busted out being past curfew like 2 or 3 times in the last year. And he's like, nope, you're done. So that was the judge. My life was in the hands of one judge is the point. That's the moral of the story, is it was one judge, all because one cop decided to take me downtown instead of just bringing me home like what happened with you and like what happened to me in the suburbs. In the suburbs, I would get stopped. What are you doing out so late? Oh, I'm coming home. We lost track of time playing video games. Where do you live? I live at the end of the block. Okay, run.
Right.
Like, don't be out here. Run.
Well, that's good.
I'd be like, okay.
Enforcement. That's why so many white people love cops. And I always tell people
this is true. That's
why I tell people
this is true.
You know, don't treat white people like black people. Treat black people like white people. Officers.
Sure.
Let me repeat that. But what I'm seeing is officers are treating white people like black people. And not treating black people like white people, which is what they should be doing, because that's how you fix and you rebuild relationships.
I agree with that 100%.
Because the cop loses nothing by giving somebody a break or letting them know you're getting a break.
Yeah.
And those acts accumulate over time, and they help police community relations over time as well.
And it's weird,
this, though?
And nobody
can we
loses.
Do this?
We got to do another podcast. We got to wrap this up. We got to do another podcast.
I want to say this again. This is stretch on this whole thing. So, like, when you get into these cops, right? The problem is these cops lose that ability, right? They become. I'm not going to use psychopath or sociopathic. I'm just going to say that they become numb to what it means to be a person. And why? Because they start to degrade human life because they're around it. So what we don't do, even when you get into like some of these touchier cases, right, where with people label it racism, it has a lot more to do with, from a psychological standpoint, how this cop views human life. And it happens, it's like if I told you to go work in a nursing home, right? The first week or so, when you changing old folks, dirty diapers, you're going to be bothered by it. You're going to complain. And something's going to happen, for better or for worse. You're going to get desensitized. It's not going to bother you as much. It's
or you're going to get aroused.
Normal. So when you get these cops that go through these same things, a city cop, what we don't talk about with city cops is all the criminals that they have to deal with. So it's hard for them to discern a criminal from, say, someone who's innocent. And that poses a huge problem with that system. It's not so much about racism. It's about, from a psychological standpoint, is this cop fit to do his job? Do they value human life? If the answer is yes, then maybe George Floyd doesn't lose his life.
And there was an old way of thinking.
Racism,
there was an old way of law enforcement, an old way of thinking that transcends generations in the police department.
Yeah.
And it goes back to when Elvis came here. And
almost like a changing of the guard.
Elvis. Yeah. So, but I can tell you, because when I was at the Urban League.
Can you tell that story? I never heard that.
I can tell you, at the Urban League, we used to have the police officers, the new recruits, their last week of training was with us, and we'd put them in nonprofits, and they'd volunteer for 3-4 days without people knowing that they were cops, just as volunteers.
Exactly.
So they're able to be able to
innovative
see
ideas.
And build, especially those cops that came from the suburbs and never seen black people before. So we've done a lot of good things, and they've come a long ways. I think that George Floyd was a personal issue. That cop knew Floyd when he was a bouncer.
My brother did security with him downtown.
Yep, and they had a personal beef, and that Asian cop was Siobhan's brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law.
Yeah, so that's why when all he had to do was turn around and tap him on the shoulder. He didn't even have to say a word.
You said
Exactly.
Siobhan.
All he had to do was tap him on the shoulder, like, okay, we got him. That's all he had to do to change the outcome of that scenario. He just didn't do that, and he should have done it.
Yep. 100%.
But do you see how, like, if you want to humanize somebody, right? Like anybody who doesn't like Tom Brady, watch his life story, and you're gonna walk away saying, "No, this guy's a winner because of all the time someone said he wasn't good enough."
Yep.
Until you do that, you're gonna just go off the narrative, and that narrative's simple. You're just gonna utter the opinion of somebody who, I don't like him because all they do is win.
What about his wife?
If you want to be a winner in life, then this is who you should be following. Don't you want to win in life?
Right.
This is what you follow if you want success, right? But what you do is you understand somebody. I mean, there's the same narrative. If that cop could share and understand the struggle of someone else, they're not going to pull a trigger. They're not going to dehumanize. Right. But like I said, it isn't empathy we're lacking, it's sympathy in our current society. If you just sit down and have a conversation, you start that human element that's capable of connecting and adapting in any given situation will start to work. And what happens? You start to connect with that other person as a person. Right on. And that's the psychological training that these cops need. That's what we have to have.
Well, we're going to give you the last word today. We're going to give you the last word today on that note, and we're going to invite you to our next podcast.
Yeah, Anwar, we got to do a podcast, the three of us.
We got you. We got the phone hooked up with your blue mic.
I appreciate it, man.
You see that?
I'm hearing all your knowledge and whatnot. I love it.
We got you hooked up.
Yeah, we'll have to do another podcast. We got another guy coming in. We're gonna shut this down and start another one here with another guest. So we got to wrap this one up.
Sometimes the sound goes out. I don't know if I'm cutting you guys off. I apologize, but
all good.
You guys got me on speaker or something. But hey, I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Yep.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast a few times. I fucking love that guy. Yeah, him and I.
Perspective.
Him and I have conversations like that on the phone. That's why I'm trying to get him on the podcast. But every time he ends up on the podcast, he's like, "Let's do Vikings. Let's talk Vikings." And all he wants to talk is football and sports. And
we didn't talk Viking World Order much.
I'm like, dude, you got so much more to fucking talk about than just Viking stuff, bro. Like,
man, that day we you see, because I run special operations division.
Explain to people what.
The Viking World Order, we're hardcore super fans throughout the NFL. We're probably one of the biggest. Us in Oakland
hardcore
are probably the biggest fan base group. We're well over 400 people. But we've got divisions: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, and I run special operations. So
it's a cult.
It's a cult. It's a Viking cult. You have to get a tattoo.
It's a cult.
You got to bleed purple. And the women's division, of course, our Valkyrie division, the lovely ladies of Valkyrie. But no, we had our guys all on 24-hour notice. that last legislative.
Yeah, you have to have a tattoo to be in it, and that's when I was out because I was like, dude, I don't even do that for an actual religion, bro. Like that's some cult level shit.
Well, we got people up within 24 hours. When that bill got beat down, within 24 hours, I had 30 people up there all painted up. And
good for you. I bet you the Mormons could do the same.
They could.
So could the Scientologists.
Oh, they're everywhere too.
Cults.
Well, I guess there's always going to be cults.
You know who else had tattoos? Nazis.
Yeah, well, I don't fit that realm. I don't think.
Are you sure?
I'll have to ask
With
Dave,
all that white privilege,
Dave Chevelle. I have enjoyed a lot of white privilege.
All that white privilege.
That's why I'm an expert on it.
Are you sure you're not a secret Nazi?
Yeah.
Nowadays, you don't even know if you're racist. Somebody has to tell you you're racist. Like, no matter what you actually think, you're only not racist if other people decide you're not racist nowadays.
Well, I
That's the
usually
world we
find
live
there's
in.
acts of oppression, and if you and acts can be done. You know, you have to be in a position of power to really be an overt racist. You have to be in a position of power to block somebody from being in power, and of course there's verbal acts of oppression too, which is simply a way to make yourself feel better by belittling somebody else. Sure. I mean, that's
even as simple as name calling.
Exactly. So very simple. But hey, listen, man.
What's the third one?
I don't remember.
You said you got 3.
It'll come back to me at the next.
3 acts of oppression.
I don't know.
Acts
of oppression's come in all forms.
We're going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys for watching. Same thing. You guys know the deal with the promo. Shooter Lube, 10 or 15% off. You heard it at the beginning. Yeah, we got to shut this down. I got to record the next read for the next one. We'll be back in like an hour or something probably. Yep. Just give me a little bit of time to get everything wrapped up and set up. But thank you guys for watching. This was a ton of fun. Yeah, and we'll see you guys next time.
Jared Singer.